Do you like sports? If you do, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players' projections and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. I've had a great time using Prize Picks so far. It makes this daily fantasy thing so easy and fun, and it even makes watching the games way more exciting. And with the cool social feeds feature, you can share lineups with your friends and even follow partners to tail or fade their picks. Obviously, we're in the NFL offseason right now, but we've got basketball, baseball, hockey, all kinds of other stuff, so don't be afraid to test things out in whatever sport clicks with you. You can even pick multiple sports in the same lineup and sweat everything at once. And don't forget about team picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So, download Prize Picks, America's #1 sports app. And don't forget, code HMA, that is HMA, gives you $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. What is going on today? It is time for another edition of Talking Seahawks with the Hawks Nest, or the B&B Show, whatever side you're on. I am Brendan. That is Brandon. We've got another NFL draft in the books, wrapped up last week on Saturday, and we've been sitting on it. We've been playing with it mentally. We've been thinking about it a lot. And we want to go ahead and just kind of do a big old roundup show talking about what the Seahawks came away with and what we as fans can take away from, well, the players that we got. So, Brandon, how are you doing today?
Feeling really good. Feel like we put a solid finish on this draft. I feel like they're going to be able to get these guys that are going to both help us in the short and the long term. And that's with a team that's a championship roster. That's sometimes kind of a big question at hand, whether you can do that. Can you find good enough guys that can supersede what you already have, considering it's a championship roster? So I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I'd say I feel pretty good as well. We have to keep things in perspective. We had bad picks and not very many picks in a bad draft. So you're not going to come away with franchise-altering players. There are not franchise-altering players to get for the most part. A couple of exceptions, but not typically the ones that we're going to have access to. But the draft is over now. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the first 3 picks we made. I know we already did shows where we kind of dove deep into those 3. But then we're going to open things up on day 3 a little bit, keeping in mind that some of the players that we took in day 3, a little bit esoteric maybe, a little bit niche, not necessarily a ton that we're able to say about them at this point in time. And honestly, I think that for a few of them, making the roster is going to be tremendously difficult, but we're going to say what needs to be said about this crew. So we're going to go ahead and I think just go ahead and jump right in. There's not really a lot going on right now other than just the draft stuff. We signed Harrison Bryant yesterday, but he's got an uphill battle to make the roster as well. I seriously doubt it. We might be signing Dante Fowler soon, but as of right now, we have no confirmation on that. So I'll go ahead and sit on that until it actually happens. And you have any objection to just swinging right into these draft picks?
No, I think let's get right into it. As you say, we still just have a lot of rumor and innuendo. And so let's wait till we can actually get something we can dig our teeth into.
Yeah, and speaking of rumor and innuendo, no, Tim Cook is not going to buy the Seahawks. He could not afford us. So I know some of you might have been wondering about that because that rumor got released earlier, but yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Interesting.
So let's start things off with our first round pick. And we spent a whole show talking about this guy already. And I understand that most of us already have our opinions and beliefs about Jadarian Price. But let's go ahead and just start from the top here, because this is, for the moment anyway, the most important pick the Seahawks have made. Because this is the one player who very clearly has a path to making significant, even major contributions to the 2026 Seattle Seahawks. Jadarian Price, if he does not start day 1, I believe that he will be starting by like week 7 or so. Because not only is he probably our most talented running back right now, but he's also an early down back for the most part. So Jadarian Price, I've got his information up on screen here. So after having a few days to mull it over, how do you feel about Jadarian Price?
Well, I do feel on this particular one a little similar to draft night, maybe marginally a little bit better, trying to think about this historically speaking. And surprising as well when I did go back and look at a guy like, Terrell Davis, because I wanted to after this and thinking about that situation and how it played off. Not to put the exact comparison on the back here, because that's a bit much to throw a Hall of Fame, player on top of Jadarian, and he's probably not quite Terrell in some certain components to his game. But I had thought kind of going in, Davis was a 220 guy, 225 guy. And that he was actually at his pro day at like 206 pounds. And that they're both size for size, Brendan, very similar to each other in how they're built, in how they tested. Not a lot of testing numbers for Terrell because he only did the pro day, but even still, the testing numbers are very similar, even down to like the vertical leap. And you think back to Terrell, and he was a guy that had some good talent, but he was also the perfectly built back for that system. And he was also a part of being able to have that success was the surrounding parts of that system. And we come back to, what generates running back success, what doesn't, what have we been told are the factors that will allow for that running back to really go and take flight versus being hindered and ground bound. And I think that when you take all that into account with this Jadarian pick, as much as feeling just way better about his talent, but kind of looking at that Terrell comparison, because there's two significant things to me that they do have very much in common, on top of having some size comparisons that are equivalent, testing times that were equivalent, is that they both can run through contact at full speed. So you can have a guy hitting them, and then they're going to still continue full speed, where a normal guy gets hit, and then he's kind of doing the shuffle and then maybe falls over, or maybe then he gets back up to full speed. But with him, it can be boom, boom, and I'm still going full speed. And it's part of what really, to me, helps him on generating those big plays. And so that's one of the first things that to me is very similar back to Terrell when you watch him, where he's coming, guys are trying to hit him into the thighs and they're just bouncing off his thighs as he's at full speed sometimes. And not being the guy at 225, again, guy that was doing that maybe about 210, which is probably what Jadarian plays at. He probably got down to 203 for the combine. But then the vision, the vision as far as that goes, that underrated factor, that thing you can't really test, Brendan, is something with him that's very similar to Terrell as well. Reading that hole right, being very decisive and making the cutback when you're going to do it, not being a beat late in getting to that cutback, but actually almost being just right on time, perfect with it, with the blocking scheme, with how it's hitting. And both those guys have a lot of that to me overlaps. And on top of the physicality stuff, not saying he's going to be Terrell. I think that you got Terrell Davis at like 90% of Terrell Davis's upside, and Aaron Jones is kind of his floor to me. And you're probably sitting somewhere in between that, or maybe even on the upper side of that. But I like the pick, and he's going to have a great chance for success here, Brendan.
Yeah. I think that would probably be the main thing with Jadarian Price. He should be successful here just because of the fact that, number one, I'm not saying that we have the best run blocking offensive line in football, but it's turning into a very good one. And I think that he will get opportunities here that you're not necessarily going to see for other running backs that get drafted in the first round. A lot of times the ones that go really, really high go to very, very bad teams. Like, think about what Saquon did in New York. Like, Price isn't going to have that problem. So,
no.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about another running back in this division that is going to be having that problem, which is going to make this another very good. This is always about it's not about that this is a fixed thing, right, Brendan? It's like science. It's like, isn't that we're at a fixed point? We're always taking in new data and new information, but the data, if in its supplemental tone, provides you something that's concretely going in alignment with what you'd seen prior, it proves the rule of thumb, right? So you mentioned that, and I think this is what we're going to get to see here in a guy in Price, has everything set up for him to have this kind of success. And we at least know even the people that be his biggest doubters would say he has some talent there. Versus Love, who's got this uber talent by a lot of people's angle of things, going to the landing spot he does. And it's going to give us another experimented play.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Jadarian Price, I kind of feel the same way I do about him now that I did on draft night. There is good stuff there, mostly in, I think, his cerebral understanding of how to play football. He is a smart player. He understands how to cut at the right time, knows how to pace a run, knows how to read the blockers and set up blockers, sees the defense well. The vision is very good. So I do think there's some positive stuff here. And the Terrell Davis comparison that you made does have a lot of merit to it. And That's obviously the best case scenario. I don't think he's ever going to win league MVP, but
Yeah.
we also kind of live in a world now where running backs are not bell cows anymore. And there was that report earlier today from Fowler. I can't remember the guy's first name, but the ESPN reporter, what is it, Benny Fowler?
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, where Price is not expected to be a bell cow running back for the Seahawks, which is kind of obvious to me, but at the same time, it does illustrate the fact that they're not going to put everything on his shoulders the way that once upon a time you would with running backs. And I would hope not, because he didn't even have a big workload in college. He averaged 10 touches a game in college, so he probably can't do it. And most running backs can't do it, by the way. Very few guys can actually be that bell cow anymore. So I understand the pick. I do. I still have to ask myself, is this the best possible pick if you're just talking about the player? I still feel like the answer to that question is probably no, but I do think we're going to get more out of Jadarian Price as a rookie than we could have out of any other player we could have gotten. And there's something to be said for that.
I think that that's a really good point on this above all else when looking at the situation and understanding that, Seattle had that choice to make in this draft, Brendan, between, I felt like the balance was you could kind of go for floor and guys that can help you immediately for a specific component to your team, or you can go for a ceiling that kind of has that mirage look to it, like in a desert, where it ain't your typical go for the ceiling in a second round or first round where you go, oh, I can see that picture clearly. I can see the plan there clearly. It was more of like maybe. And Seattle went the other way, in my opinion. This pick is a little bit representative of that. I think, too, that in these first two selections, Brendan, you've gotten two what I call backbreaker players. And that is that these are also two players at specific points in the game that can break the back of the opponent right as you're about to put them down. That they come in with that one play that's just like, just takes all the sail out of the wind, all the wind out of the sails. And that team's just sitting there going, man, that's it. We've got no other room. That was one play we couldn't give up here. And he does so with those big plays by what you saw with some of that vision and whatnot. Got a couple of plays here I want to show that I'm going to have Brendan share from my side of things.
Okay. Let me get the banner off just so we can see the whole play.
Yeah.
There we go.
So these are going to be today. We're not going through film tape on all these guys in this section here, guys. It's as much to try to give you a couple snapshot plays on each player or one snapshot play on a player to kind of really, here's what this really represents on what this guy brings to the table. And first and foremost with this is the vision on display on this run. This is a little contact bounce through the hole. It gets an arm tackle through the hole. And then it's the acceleration to get to the spot. Even though not a high tester, maybe a guy that GPS speed-wise is a guy that tests very fast. Wouldn't surprise me with Seattle if that was the case. So inside run here. Sorry, my cat's starting to cry here, so I got to let her out 1 second.
Okay, no problem. No problem. We will be right back, people. If you have pets, you guys know what we're dealing with sometimes.
So I'm going to take this back here just to kind of show in the hole again on this as we go through just a little slow. And we won't prolong this, but I just want to take a step. First, it's the center with the zero tech loses the block. So he gets it controlled. You can see that the center's pushed into the backfield. The one tech now has everything firmly established. He's pushed him out of where the hole's going with Jadarian Price. And he's going to just get a meat hook arm here onto Jadarian, but right through it. Just snaps right through that contact. And while this is not a good tackle and it's a good enough job of keeping that other arm engaged by the offensive lineman, even though he lost the rep, still here, this shows that high speed you still get through contact where a lot of running backs get knocked off their hitch. And he's not a big back necessarily, but this stands out on tape when you watch him in that contact balance, not just contact balance, but speed through contact balance. And then the acceleration to get outside and go get the touchdown. So this is one that just kind of shows in kind of short spaces what he does. But the second one I want to show here, Brendan, this is the really important one. And this is not even a run here. But this is the thing you talked about his vision. And I will share this again with you. I got to relaunch these each time. So,
okay, no problem.
You talked about his vision, and I talked about the back-breaking nature of what he could bring as far as that run that can just tear your heart out as a defense. You didn't necessarily get the play call wrong. He just made a sensational play on you. And with running backs, we oftentimes think about them as being jukers and spin moves and stiff arms and can he hurdle? Whereas with him, it is this vision and then his feet and his vision talking to his feet instantaneously. So with this play, and I have to show it, Brendan, a little bit like midstream because of the fact that, we'll get nailed if we don't with the stuff as far as the copyright goes. This is a throw out to the flat, to the top side of the screen here. And so what you want to look is upper right-hand quadrant of the screen is where you're going to see Jadarian Price. And before I run this play, what I want everyone to notice here on the back is look at the backside defenders here by the defense of Arkansas. Look at all of those free red jerseys that are in pursuit. Yes, the front side is blocked up with the two guys up on the front side to give him that. But all of those other guys are rallying, okay? So I'm going to play this a little bit more. Okay, one more pause. I'm going to play it full in a second, but this is kind of the fun of this play. He scores a touchdown on this play, Brendan. Right where this play is at right now.
Right.
Blocks getting lost to the inside. You got 4 defenders pursuing over the top, and he scores a touchdown here. Not because this is beautifully blocked, not because he pulls off some amazing fancy move, but because his vision takes him across the field at just the right time. I mean, almost untouched, folks. Not only does he get across the field here, but almost untouched.
Very
and
nice.
that is the thing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I'm sorry, but that's the thing to me that started when I went back and watched a little bit of the tape to kind of give a little more respect to, is the understanding that he knows which to turn at just the right moment, like a Madden player that can just kind of pull into the blocks right at just that right moment, so to speak. And he's got that. And I don't think there's a lot of backs in this draft, including even Jeremiah Love on this play, that score a touchdown.
Yeah. There is definitely positive stuff here. And again, mostly to me, it is like his smarts. He's a smart football player. He understands how to utilize his, what I would call somewhat limited talent to its maximum. I don't think he's especially fast or quick or powerful or anything like that. I just think that he knows how to maximize what he gets. So he will play a lot this year. He will do stuff. I still do believe that this was a little bit of a value reach, and it was probably motivated by the fact that we needed a running back. And I think that even the people who praise this pick, and I've seen a lot of people praising the pick, their praise tends to start with some version of, well, it was our biggest hole, which that's where I start to get a little bit touchy, because you're not talking about the player at that point. You're talking about the team. Like you're praising the player without actually talking about the player. But it is what it is. And I can understand that on some level, there is a desire to attack what it is that you need the most when you're a team that is trying to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I think your assessment of it's accurate. I wouldn't push back against any of it. I certainly don't think I would have turned my outlook of the pick around from that. I think that the thing that is the part that does drift me into the place of not having a normal reaction to what you laid out. Normally my reaction would be like, ooh, I do think the fact that this draft is so weak and you are having a championship roster, you are returning, are two kind of major factors that in this case have to maybe in a special way be considered in other ways where you would not in any way, shape, or form consider them when making this selection.
Yeah. I think that the weakness of this draft does make it a little bit better. I think that in a good draft, I don't know if Jadarian Price would even be like a middle 3rd round pick. I think he might actually push down into that like late day 2, early day 3 range. But that's not what we were dealing with. I think that taking him at 32 is still suboptimal, but I'm not going to call it bad. I don't think it's bad. I think that the bad thing that we did was go into the draft with such a destitute depth chart at running back that made us feel like we had to do something about it.
Yeah, I think you look at picks that I've looked at historically that I've had a problem with John in the years that I've had, and there have been many in recent years, as far as like when you're really reaching, when you're really going hard, it's the LJ Collier, where you can just know in the moment, we're not getting anything from this guy, not immediately and probably not long-term. And with Jordan Brooks, you've got KJ and Bobby on the roster already, and I don't think he can cover. And how's this going to work? And then Eskridge, with Locke and DK here, and you passed on Creed. It's one where there isn't that other alternative player that you passed on in a Creed. Yeah, there would have been maybe a guy there you could, but I think you made a point earlier on this that you wouldn't have gotten that instantaneous return this season. And unlike the opponents in our division, I think that there was an outlook in this draft of trying to get some returns from it and find some certainty where you can. And again, back to partly this is a weak draft. If it had its strength, if it had its Riley Mills in the 4th round or Torrey Horton in the 5th round, I think John operates probably a little bit differently. But this draft was, I think, as we got through it, Brennan, everyone's up and down saying it at this point, and I don't think it's just a group speak or an echo chamber. I think it truly was not just a bad draft, by the way. Not to people, yeah, it's okay, so it's a suboptimal. No, historically bad draft. Let's put it that way. Like the worst draft in 2 decades with ease.
Yeah, and Brady Henderson was on the Rob Stanton show, I think it was yesterday, where he was talking about some inside scoops. And one thing he said was the Seahawks believed that after Price, the next best running back had about a 5th round grade in their book. Now, whether or not that's fair, whether or not that's true to what the player actually is worth is obviously up for debate, but it does illustrate the fact that they viewed Price as being much better than anybody else they could have gotten. Again, that goes back to the fact that they allowed their running back depth chart to be so bad in the first place. They've had to address it, but it is worth noting that if you take Brady Henderson at his sources, then it is absolutely fair to say that they didn't feel like they had much of a choice.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, you had Charbonnet that you draft after Walker to hopefully give you some of this reinforcement for the situation. If Walker were to leave in free agency, you had this guy theoretically you could plug right in, and then the pressure wouldn't be as much on you to have to go get this running back. But the ACL injury pushes you along on this pathway to make this happen. And it's certainly, we both know they tried to make a run at Breece Hall. They tried to make a run at A-Chain out there with the Dolphins. And those teams seem to be trying to hold everybody over the barrel if they're going to make the trades there. And maybe John didn't feel like there was much guarantee or hope that they were going to make a move of those guys later on this year at the deadline, or that he could get him then. And at that point, it does start to get kind of thin as far as your options go when you say, okay, we're going to avoid this draft, or like you said, 5th round grades that were on the rest of the running backs in this class. And to your point on that, those guys 4th round, I think, Washington somewhere in the 4th round, if I'm not mistaken. So the NFL kind of told you that they were in alignment with where Seattle was in that outlook of things.
Right. And also it is worth noting that there are people, and who knows, we'll never know. There are people who think the Niners were going to take Price at 33.
Yeah. And I mean, that's hard for me to know for sure too. They did need a running back. They were going to target one. But the Niners have that whole model of, I've said it the last couple of days. I mean, you can look through their drafts and it's like, they do this exact model of how they've approached receiver, edge, running back is the 3rd pick. And they've done that for a long period of time where like that's been their modus operandi. So, and they don't seem to be a team that's very intent on changing their ways when it comes to any draft one to the other. They just kind of do what they're going to do. But it's possible. It is possible. And I don't know if you saw the video, but you definitely saw Lynch and Shanahan very kind of cagey when they were in their press conference being talked, and Seattle came up in the background as their pick was up. Like I definitely got the feeling, and I don't think they were worried about us grabbing Stribling. You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows why John Lynch does anything that he does? I guess
wild draft, man. Wild draft from our division.
I don't want to sound like I'm making light of it, but that CTE is no joke, people.
No, that isn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or the Chat GPT, because he's I think we talked about this last time, but he is the guy who brags about using AI to help make decisions.
You're hearing about AI psychosis, right? These guys that get on this AI and it takes them into some kind of psychosis as they starts talking to them and they feel like they've got a relationship with it, and you know what I mean? Like maybe he's got a little of that going on. You know what I mean? The machine is talking to me.
Yeah. So Jadarian Price, not my preference. I do think it's a bit of a reach, but it's okay. And I do think that for the most part, we're going to end up in a spot where a few years later we look back at it and go, yeah, that was fine. It's not going to be like LJ Collier where it makes us want to just throw ourselves out the window.
Agreed. Yeah, I see it the same exact way.
A couple donations here. Feed Me More. Thank you for the 20. Sorry for the question, Brent.
Let me get my applause there.
20? Sorry for the question, but what was Mike's and Jake's deal? You don't need an O-line if you have the right running back. Did you not watch Genty last year with Raiders O-line, or Bijan last year with Falcons O-line? Complete madness. I'm assuming this has to do with the Roundtable, but I didn't watch it, so you're going to have to take this one.
Yes, I was on the roundtable, and it was a really fun roundtable show this last Tuesday, and we got into a lot of debate regarding this last draft in a couple of different areas. And there was a lot more seemingly praise there for the Cardinals draft than I would have given it. And I'm of a firm camp on this, that the Love pick is not a good pick from the Cardinals organization standpoint if the point is to try to win games and not sell tickets. And yes, at one point or another, the argument, Brendan, got around to the point of it selling tickets from one of the two people that were trying to go up against me on this debate, where that's where it eventually got down to, as I was kind of peeling apart the points of it. And they don't really counter what I say on this. Like, okay, there's parameters at place that allow for running back to have success. The Cardinals are providing none of these parameters to Jeremiah Love, yet he's going to be successful. Yet that then makes it a good pick. If you have not set that up in front of him to have that success, and now you're going to have him through his rookie contract trying to put these parts together and try to fast forward to getting them in place rather than having him in place, and thus not maximizing him, and he's expensive at the same point in time, I just think it was on every level a bad pick, and they're just like, no, he's the best player in the draft. So that's just, and look, value is how you want to run a board. I know I'm a big person that bangs that drum hard. At the same point in time, running backs are a little bit different when it comes to the draft and where you draft them, and especially when we're talking top 5, top 10. This is rarefied air. This isn't just 23 in the first round. This is you with an opportunity to trade back, collect more assets, get significant assets there, still add a great player at 8 or 9. And I still maintain, Brendan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this, of course, but I still maintain as well that I think there were offers on the board for the Cardinals to trade back. I don't think they got what they wanted to get for trading back because it didn't match to what you'd get in prior years. And that's why they turned it down, not because they didn't have offers. And that's the BS part of it to me, Brendan. That's a big part of also what makes this a bad pick. You turn those offers down, turn down making your team collectively better so that you could sell some tickets. And that's why you're an organization that's never going to win a Super Bowl. Ever.
Yeah, like I respect Jeremiah Love. I think he's a good player. I think that he was one of the 10 best players in this draft. But I think that if you stack him up to other top running backs in recent draft history, he's not as good. He's not as good as even Genty to me. He's not as good as Bijan. Oh. He's not as good as Saquon.
Peterson.
Adrian Peterson. Like Trent Richardson's weird because he was so bad in the NFL, but at the time when he came out, there was, I'd say the perception of him was better than the perception of Love is right now. I'm not saying he's going to be Trent Richardson bad, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I think it was a no-brainer at the time. He's going to go 4th overall, and it was like that's where he should go based on what he was doing in college and Alabama running backs having some success. And I think that was fair. And I think Love's definitely gonna be better than him, but I do think that this is one where it doesn't make any sense to your point as far as you're not getting to me a Hall of Fame talent here necessarily, even on top of all of these other points. And
right.
Again, the running back position, as the analytics people have proven, as this is shown time and time again, is driven by what's in front of them, not by the superhero talent they possess. And this is the argument I don't ever seem to make any headway with people, where they just get caught up on the specific talent itself. And it's like, look, that's not the point. With running backs, it's not the point. It's nice to have, but it's not the point. Because if you put those conditions in front of them and you make it right, anyone can have that great success. We're making the comparison to Terrell Davis on this, Brendan. Part of the comparison is also what Terrell Davis walked into. Hall of Fame quarterback who did his postdoctorate work. An offensive line fully put together, if I'm not mistaken, with at least a Hall of Famer or two upon it. Wide receivers on the outside like Rod Smith and McCaffrey, McCaffrey's father out there, who are able to be, hey, you better stay out there in that cover too. You better not come down, bring that box, because we got a guy over the top. Shannon Sharp at tight end. A decent to above average to good defense. Like all of that put together along with your individual talent to allow for the success. It's all of that. It's not just one thing. It's all of it. But it's like this argument's like the quarterback thing comes down to people just getting caught up with one specific item of it to me versus trying to look at the whole picture of what brings about that success. And that's what part of unpacking these picks and determining their success and not success specifically for this position, not for every position, not for a cornerback that's out on an island, not for a defensive tackle that just has to whoop his guy's ass every snap, but for a running back who is reliant on these conditions, it is.
Right. And look, this is the 3rd overall pick. I know it's not a good draft, but the cost of being suboptimal at number 3 overall is massive. Like, it's not the same as us being suboptimal at 32. If we're suboptimal, and I do believe that we were, then that's a little unfortunate, but it's the 32nd overall pick in a bad draft. The Cardinals were picking third. You have to hit there. You have to really hit hard too. So I think that when you scale things, it becomes much worse, because the other thing going on is, to me personally, and I know this is subjective, I think Arvell Reese was the best player in this draft. He was my number one. And I think that if the Cardinals could have come away with him because he was there, that would have made much more sense, because Arvell Reese is going to impact the game way more than Jeremiah Love is, I think, because he can play multiple positions. And one of his positions is edge rusher, which is one of the most important positions in the modern game. So I look at Arvell Reese and I'm like, that would have done so much more for you. Or you trade back to like 8 and you get Maui Goa, and maybe you pick up an extra second round pick in the process. Maybe you trade back to 12 and pick up a future first round pick from Dallas, and then you get Caleb Downs. I think those are both better than what you did.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with you on this. And if you're a cop, I know with the people, oh, he's got this back. Okay, Spencer Fanu, right? Like, and then you come back in the next round and still take Basantis. Like, that's a scary proposition of a team as far as Cardinals go going in the future than this. Or what you said with Reese. I may not be quite as high on you. I'm still very high, still have a first round grade, but to your point, that still makes them a scary proposition as we go forward. And on top of all of this, the Cardinals didn't plan to do this. You signed Tyler Algiers to a free agent contract, gave him money. You restructured Connor. You've got Benson coming back. You've already put a load of resources into this position, draft capital and both. Like, this was just one that to me, this was one that just screamed of, they didn't necessarily love the options there. They couldn't get the trade back for the capital they wanted. So they just kind of were like, love. It's not one to me that they sat there and they've been thinking this out and planning this out far in advance. It's just felt reactive to me from them in a big time way. And I think that he's going to have a hard time. Not that he won't be productive, not that he's going to be a good player, but that them getting the value, them turning themselves into a team that can be not only a playoff contender, but a Super Bowl contender. I just don't see this as being the pathway, especially with what they did the rest of their draft, like Carson Beck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, like, other than Love and Beck, I thought their draft was pretty good. But those two picks carry a lot of weight, because the Beck thing is, what if the Cardinals decide, oh, we don't need a quarterback next year, we're going to pass on Arch Manning because we have Carson Beck? Like, that's a disaster. The disaster doesn't even really capture it. Or you do take a quarterback next year like Arch Manning, and then Carson Beck just becomes a completely wasted pick immediately, despite being the first pick in the third round.
And if only we had a baseline of the Cardinals taking quarterbacks back-to-back years, overusing draft capital in doing so. Do we have that as a baseline, Brendan, of them ever doing that in their history and failing or succeeding?
Yeah, that one was an all-timer. That one's much worse than this one would be, but it's still bad. Like
still in the neighborhood though. It's a block down, but it's in the neighborhood.
So yeah, I don't. Although one thing I would say about this super chat, I don't know if the Falcons O-line was particularly bad last year. They lost Caleb McGarry on the right side, but other than that, I don't think that offensive line's terrible or anything. And I think Bijan was good last year, but the Genty thing, absolutely.
Yeah, they had, I mean, it's a little bit up and down. They've got some good parts to it, some bad. They lost Dahlman to the offseason of free agency. So the center position was a little bit of a ride for them last year. So, but they've had, I think when they drafted Bijan, at least they did have the offensive line in place there with the Falcons to get more out of him through his time. It's kind of eroding now, but Dahlman was there and Caleb McGarry was there. And they've got I think the left guard's pretty decent there. And then of course, Matthews has been there for a decade. So, that's just one of, at least with them, you could understand them taking him when they took him there because they had at least some of the spots set up. Now they didn't have the defense. They didn't have a great offensive system. They didn't have the quarterback. Receivers were, pretty okay at the time. You had pretty much London. So you got one of the components, but the point is to try to, if you're going to go chase the star running back, it's not that you don't ever go do it, but if you're going to go do it, offensive line in place if you can do this, offensive line in place first, receivers on the outside that can threaten, capable quarterback play, offensive system in place, a defense that gets off the field and not living on the football field and not giving up a ton of points so that you can be in a position to run the ball. Have as many of those put together as you possibly can. In Seahawks' case, they're giving all of those to Jadarian Price. In Jeremiah Love's case, they're giving none of those to him. It's a stark difference to me.
Right. So we'll see how things end up working out in Arizona, but I'm not super optimistic about it. I guess I would say that.
No, me neither.
Feed Me, thank you for the 2. Based on Kyle and John's reactions, they wanted Price. A lot of people do think that, and given the fact that they kind of reached a little bit crazy for Kalon Black, it seems very believable.
Well, I've been putting the Terrell Davis comp here too. So part of this, I would say, just to feed me on this one, would be to say, well, if I can kind of quasi see a little bit of Terrell Davis here in this kid and how he runs and the way he goes about his business, would Shanahan, whose father coached Davis, also potentially see those comparisons as well and be hot to trot for him for kind of similar reasons? Very possibly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Feed Me, thank you for the $2 again. He also said Love was a better prospect than Bijan. Yeah. I think you could have a debate about Love versus Genty. I think that there's at least something to be said there. It's at least arguable, but Bijan, no, not even close. Bijan's generational in my mind. I think Bijan is like the equivalent to Adrian Peterson or Marshall Faulk for his era.
Yeah, I think his ability on the contact balance stuff, Love's a little bit more of the elusive, get away from you and be a lot of cool moves doing it. He's a little bit more if he can do that, and he can still kind of run through you as a combination for me with Bijan. So and he can do all the stuff as a pass catcher out of the backfield that Love can do. So I would give more of the nod to Bijan. I'd want more Bijan than Love between the two of myself.
Yeah, to me, that's an easy one. Genty is a little bit more debatable to me because Genty, there are some concerns, and I wasn't super impressed with him as a rookie, but I still think Genty is a little bit better. And of course, then you got Saquon, Peterson, Trent Richardson, on and on and on.
Yeah, exactly. And but I think if you see the guys that have had success that have come out that we've loved in the top 10 that have been those no-brainer guys, everyone would, I think, take those guys over necessarily this one, which again, he's not going to be a bad player. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. It's just that, getting a guy that's going to be in sub 1,000-yard seasons with a couple hundred yards out of the backfield, you could have gotten that other ways. You didn't have to do the number 3 overall pick to get that production from the position.
Yeah, I mean, they took Trey Benson a couple years ago. To me, that guy is still probably going to be pretty good. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, Trey Benson can be a top lead running back, I think, in this league.
You made him wait first behind Connor, and then he ran well when he had a couple of instances. And then when Connor got injured and he went out there, he got injured. And then you were like, all right, well, he can't stay out. They were done. And it's like, that's part of the thing they do with the quarterback thing. You just said a second said about Beck, which they did with Kyler Murray and Josh Rosen the year before that. It's an organization that just like will sit there and they just, whether they're spinning through coaches or players, they go through stuff really fast. Nothing ever really develops. Nothing's ever got time to kind of suit in. They're kind of running on to the next thing. It's just kind of that a little bit going on with them. And I just don't think it's going to be successful.
Right. McFuhrer, thank you for the $4.99. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Mike and Jake were on one during the roundtable. Rams get a B draft grade. Jesse's reaction said it all. Didn't they hate those picks beforehand? Yeah, that confused me a little bit because Jake in particular, I know, made no secret of the fact that he despised the Rams' approach in the draft when it was happening. I know that. And then I know that on the roundtable, he went against that.
Well, you can understand why I kind of then went at him a little bit on that. And when with Mike, it's a little bit of like, Mike, you guys got to learn your lessons here kind of thing. And I tried to tell both those guys on my perspective on assessing each of their drafts. I wasn't looking at it as a Seahawks fan who's like pointing and laughing at the rivals' drafts and what they had. It was me acting like if I'm a Cardinal fan, what would I want to see? If I, as a Ram fan, what would I want to see? And if you kind of like, because I think people get a color, they get a little bit turned on that a little bit. And I'm just like, Mike, I'm trying to lead you to the promised land here, brother. I'm trying to show your team the way. Your team seems lost in the forest and the woods and they can't find their way out. I'm showing you a guiding light right now. And you're knocking my hand away and saying, no, let's double back down on the crap that got us here in the first place. And with the Rams, you're right. Jake's got this whole like hates Ty Simpson for 2 months. And now it's trust the plan. And it's like, none of them pushed back on me saying, I said to everybody on this one, and Mike's going to get a little bit more. They're going to get some production this year from that class. But I mean, how much production are the Rams and Niners really going to get from their 2026 classes this year? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I made a whole video about this. I don't think the Rams get a thing from their rookie class. Like, even if Max Clare plays, he's taking snaps away from a tight end that was better last year than Clare will be this year. Like, let's say the Rams trade Parkinson. Okay, great. Now Clare gets to play, but is Clare going to be better than Parkinson was last year? I don't think so. I think Clare is kind of a flawed prospect anyway. He doesn't have very good hands. He's not a very good blocker. To me, he's mostly just like a mismatch where he's big and fast enough to be hard to defend, but he's not actually a great pass catcher even then, to me.
That's where you, like you say on this, that's also kind of like where we've talked about this. As a team, you tend to carry the three tight ends, 2 in line, 1 H back. The Rams are now going to decide to carry, it seems like they've got 3 kind of inline-ish guys, and now they're going to carry 2 H-back-ish guys. Meanwhile, Ferguson could barely find the field last year as it was, and he's the redundancy for Ferguson. So what happens there? You're not going to run 2 H-backs out, Brendan, for the exact reasons that you just said about Claire. Can't block. Guess who else isn't the best of blockers? Ferguson. So you're going to, you get your mismatches out there, but there's no threat to the defense of a run because they're out there to try to get the mismatches in the pass game because they can't really block in the run game. They're not going to trust him in that fashion to do so. So you become predictable if you're trying to put them both on the field at the same time is kind of what I'm saying. I think that the picks don't add up to me in the long term. Maybe you get the production from them. Trost isn't going to start unless you get an injury. So like just long term, you may get something down the road, but initially you're not getting anything. And these were teams, all of us, Niners, Rams, Seahawks, and it was all tight right along the line down to the end, like why is it suddenly now there's this great difference of you like ramp? Like, why wouldn't you think going into this from the mode and how you'd want to roll your offseason going up against these other 2 teams to think, how can we get ourselves even just a bit more better above them? Which is, I think the Seahawks approach this offseason. I don't know if it's been as much the approach of the Rams and Niners, certainly in free agency, they got a little bit more aggressive, but in the draft, big step backwards at that point.
Right. And I think the Niners get a little bit out of their 2026 class, but not necessarily a lot. Like it's not enough anyway for a team that you look at it, you kind of already know in your head, the team they have now is not going to be the team they have in January because they're a bunch of old guys and they're not going to make it. I know that Niners fans, whenever we talk about how we beat them by 5 touchdowns in the playoff game, they say, well, we were injured. You didn't really do a lot to mitigate that potential problem going into 2026. You're probably going to be injured again because these are old players that do get hurt. Christian McCaffrey he'll be lucky to be alive by the time we get to January if Shanahan keeps using him the way he's been using him the last few years. So I don't think that's going to get better. So you're going to need guys like Kalon Black and Stribling to be special by the time you get to January. And I don't see that happening.
Also, I do think you're right about them getting a little more out of their draft than the Rams got this year. I think they are going to get that to their credit, but also an older draft, 25 years old. Kalon Black's like 5 years younger than Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. I was joking on the Roundtable last night that they're the first team in NFL history whose average age of roster has actually gotten older after the draft.
Yeah. I think Keegan Trost, by the way, is 25 already as well. I think he turned 25 the week before the draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's one where I definitely am like, we'll see, guys. We'll see. And the long term is one thing. I look at it more for 2026 because we're trying to repeat. We're the champions. You maybe look a little bit more on this stuff into future years if this wasn't the case, but they're also supposed to be rolling in the same manner, and they don't seem to be operating the same way. And I think the Rams have gotten a little bit egotistical in their place where they're like, oh, we made these 2 cornerback moves. That's all we had to do. That's it. We're done. Everything else will be exactly the same next year. We'll be a little bit better even. And then these 2 guys, and that'll put us over the top. That's all we had to do. I think that's a bit of a simplistic outlook from their standpoint, and I think they could have done more, and I think they're going to regret not doing more, especially when they look at this draft class next season.
Yeah, and I think with the Rams also, there's this sense that we have to trust whatever Snead does because he's so good. And I mean, he's good at some stuff. I look at these recent drafts, though, since he got to L.A., and like there's some good stuff, but there's also some stuff that I mean, especially early in drafts, he really has not been that great. Like it's been mixed. And some of it's because he doesn't have a lot of picks, but look at some of the top picks he's made in some of these classes. It's like, Logan Bruss, who barely played, Tutu Atwell, who's not really much of anything, Cam Akers, Van Jefferson. I guess Taylor Rapp was good. Joseph Noteboom was okay. I don't know. I don't see anything here that makes me go, unless Snead we trust.
Yeah, what they've done is they've managed to find sometimes these day 3 guys that are really turning into pretty good players. And that's great that you find that value there. But to your point, they also get this credit for being this somehow drafting dynamo team when they've dumped so many picks through the years, be it the first rounders or a second, third rounder for Von Miller, this has been the way they've done. And at the top of the draft, they haven't been necessarily as successful. Even in the case of like a Jared Verse, who's this monstrous, massive success. The guy's got like what, 6 sacks or what, 7, 8 sacks through 2 years. You know, like he gets a lot of like pressure and he's pretty good against the run, but you know, that's kind of their Braden Fisk isn't very good. He's awful against the run and he didn't exactly come forward as a pass rusher last year. So, I think that he does get this pass here that's kind of strange sometimes.
Yeah, and by the way, Rams fans are starting to wonder a little bit about Jared Verse. Now, I think it's a little unwarranted. I think Verse is fine, but I do think that there's something to be said for the fact that he didn't take a step forward in 2025 that people were expecting. He wasn't even their best edge rusher last year, which was surprising, I think.
Yeah, especially because he is a guy that is a guy that kind of wasn't an old prospect, but he was a pretty finished prospect coming out. This isn't a guy that's going to need a lot of development, but you know what he's got to go off of is basically that power, and he doesn't have a whole lot aside from that in his bag, and it's great power, but you got to have a little bit more than just the one trick at times out there as a pass rusher because offensive linemen can anticipate that and kind of negate it some.
Feed me. Thank you for the 2. Carson Beck is a terrible quarterback to maximize Marvin Harrison.
He's a terrible quarterback, and Wide Wilson too. I mean, I don't understand the pick on any level from the standpoint of you draft a guy in day 2, even in the 3rd round, and you're getting a guy with no physical. Problem with the Simpson pick too. It's a little like, what are the physical tools with this that get you tantalized to take this guy in the first 2 days of the draft? Because that's to me should be the necessity in taking a quarterback that high. I shouldn't be talking about everything with throws with anticipation, leader, bubba to this, but the stuff that always comes back to like, so he's got no arm and no mobility is what you're telling me. Yeah. Okay. What am I going to do with that on an NFL level? You know, what is that guy going to do when he sees the football field? I can't like Miami could kind of save him with like running the ball a bunch and then just having him throw bubble screens like you can in college and little drag routes underneath. I can't live that way in the NFL. So.
Right. Yeah, I think Carson Beck's best case scenario is like Case Keenum, somebody who floats around as a backup and maybe finds a little bit of success as a starter for a little bit, but it won't feel real. It won't feel permanent. It'll just kind of feel like, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop here. I think that's kind of his destiny.
Yeah, I do as well. And I another pick in this Cardinal draft was like, and I love Bisontes. That's a great pick for them, but those first 2 are a little tough for me.
Yeah, and even Bisontes, like that's a good pick, but I don't think it's some radical steal. I didn't think Bisontes should have been a 1st rounder or something. I think they got appropriate value. Like I don't think they didn't do enough with that pick to make up for the fact that they picked who they picked with the other picks is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like, it's big part of what you do in the drafts, what you do early and what you're able to bring to your team by what you do early. Cause the guys late rarely do tend to give you much, even if you like them a lot. It's just the nature of the way this thing goes.
All right. So let's get back to our draft class here. I know we're pretty deep into the show. We've only talked about one guy, but Bud Clark is next up here, the TCU safety. A lot of excitement around this one, I think, because he is such a radical ball hawk. I got his numbers up on screen here. He's a safety, but he actually spent most of his snaps at slot corner when he was at TCU. So he can do both. He can do a lot of both. And that versatility is something that I think really speaks to Mike McDonald. So give me the skinny on Bud Clark.
Instincts in coverage, where he's going to land long term. We're going to see. You get the instantaneous returns here. Like in so many ways, Jadarian and him have so many echoes early on. Where there is some reachiness to these picks, but there's also some understandability in why you did that, and knowing that as well. The guys are going to bring something to you next year. The slot insurance, as we talked about at the end of day 2, for Emanuel can't be understated because it's a 2-for-1. Witherspoon gets to stay on the outside now, and you can bring him down in there. I think long-term, he can absolutely develop as a safety. My snap that's going to show off in a minute or 2 here after we kind of wrap up on talking about him as him aligning out of a single high look as a free safety. So he's got plenty of snaps where he can do that. And when you say, instincts and taking away the ball, I think, we go 14 interceptions, 4-year career, and people kind of like maybe gloss over a little bit of that. But the ability to anticipate in coverage and feel and read things in coverage and be able to pull the trigger at the right moments, to sense where things are going at the right moments, that really shows up with him time and time again. So he's got all of these interceptions that he's actually secured and had. But if you went back and looked through his tape as well and just looked individually through his games this year, you would see a whole nother collection of even more that he had his hands on, tips up for his teammate, just always around the ball, always the nose for being in the right place around the ball to go and then make a play. And that's that backbreaking element I talked about. With Jadarian, it's the backbreaking run he can hit you with at the right time. Maybe he's having a tough day. You get late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, you're up by 7. He comes in with this 50-yard run for another touchdown, game's over. With what you have your defense doing. This guy likewise, same situation. You're up by 7, early fourth quarter. They need to throw. They're trying to drive. They're deep in your territory. Quarterback throws. He picks it off, returns it back up to the 50-yard line. That's the kind of plays you're going to be able to get from him as a bare minimum. That's the kind of plays that you're going to be able to get from him as a bare minimum. And that's why I come back and I go, this pick's going to be able to bring you those returns long-term with him and his playmaking and his ability to go find the ball. It's going to give you the returns with him in the slot, very comfortable in there. He can cover very well from in there. He's not going to be quite, of course, even Warrior or probably even Witherspoon, but he allows Witherspoon to stay outside and he's going to be more than competent. I told you on draft night, I saw him as an upgraded Quentin Lake, who's been a slot dynamo for the Rams there for the most part, as he's been moving that territory / sometimes as a safety. But I think he's got some upside. I'm not as worried about the kid's weight. If I'm mistaken, Kobe Bryant was also about the same, 188, 190 pounds. And he was able to transition very, very easily out there to the safety position. They're very similarly sized all the way around. So if Kobe can pull it off, I don't know why, he can't pull it off.
Yeah, right. And he also has the frame to add some weight. He's 6'1". So if he wants to add a little bit of weight, it should be fine. And he's got speed to burn. So if it makes him a little bit slower, that's really not too bad. So I'm not too worried about that either. I also think that he'll be an okay tackler. I don't know if he'll be great, but I think that stuff will come around because he's very willing. He's totally somebody who's going to get his jersey dirty if he needs to make tackles. He puts himself in the right position a lot. But the main thing with him is, of course, just the ball hawking ability and his ability to read and react to route combos and understand what he's looking at from zone. So there's plenty to like here. I think there's an interesting discussion to have now. Is he going to start over Okada or not when the season starts? And I don't think he will, but I think it's possible.
It certainly is possible, but I would be very surprised to see it happen. If the season wound down and he eventually kind of finds that footing with it, then maybe. But this is a very complicated defense, and a lot of it is back end communication between the safeties to the front end and them guiding things at times and what they're seeing up on the front end and how shifts and changes happen up in front of you with the offense. And that's stuff that I don't know if you want to put that on a rookie's plate and tell him to pick all that up. First, being able to specialize him in a role as the first safety off the bench and as your first slot off the bench, which you're probably going to find snaps in that role at one point or another, just naturally speaking. So I don't think so. I think Okada is going to be firmly in that place. I think Okada had a really good year last year. The more Okada played, the better he got. He was only out the field as much just because they're going back to kind of their standard. I think there's some arguments to be made at times that he outplayed Kobe. So not next year, but long-term, yes.
Right. So I do think that's probably true. Do you think he's the corner off the bench for dime packages as well? Like when we go 6 DB, do you think he's the guy who's the 6th defensive back?
Most likely. Yeah, most likely because it's that with Neil, you're going to want to keep him more on the outside. Change direction stuff can get a little bit isolated with him, even though he can give you the nice tackling there. So I would think that this guy would probably be that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be a Price level of production. I think Price does give you like about a close to 1,000 yards this year. I had like 960 yards and eight or nine touchdowns from Price because the circumstances are going to dictate it. Clark, I went with more like something like 21 tackles and I gave him an interception. It'll probably be like a garbage time interception where they're throwing against a prevent defense, but it'll build into somebody that is probably going to be a starter in 2027.
Yeah, I like that. I like where your numbers are at. I'd probably be in about alignment. I think Price Picks has got Price at 725 yards for the season. I'd take the over on that myself. I think right out the gate he's going to get a lot of touches and get a lot of opportunities as Charbonnet is on the mend. I mean, it's going to be a 2-back set, but look, we saw with both, even with Charbonnet at the end, almost 200 carries last year as just purely the number 2 guy. Well over 200 touches with the catches factored in. So you're still going to get your share. This is the new modern era. It's less about the bell cow and more about it's who's your 200 touch guy going to be? Who's your 200 touch guys going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And in the case of Clark, I think it'll be, like I said, somewhere around 21 tackles, maybe 1 or 2 picks. And I think those picks are going to come in the situation you're talking about, where the other team is desperately trying to get the ball down the field because they're playing from behind at the end. And then Clark just takes it away. And it's like, okay, that's over. The game's done.
100%. I think he's got that just in instincts and intuition at times in coverage, really just reads things. And it's also partly just you're a 3-time team captain, all this starting experience. You gain that wisdom for the position, and you have less of a question about what you're seeing in front of you. And you've studied tape, and you've really put the work in that way to develop yourself as a player beyond just your physical skill set. And it shows up with him in that way. You don't get here by just kind of just naturally lucking into the right spot, the right place. And it's as much of those dropped interceptions for me, Brendan, is the secured ones, that he's in all these other positions to nearly be able to pull it back, in addition to the times he does.
Right. Now, he is a little overly aggressive. He's probably going to get beat a few times in this league. We just have to be ready for that early. Maybe he'll learn, but he is a gambler. So there is a little bit of that going on here. He is a little bit weak because he's so lean, but he can add weight to do something about that. And I know he did battle a little bit of injury problems in college. I don't think he had any major injuries, but he had some minor ones. So there could be a little bit of like the soft tissue stuff going on here. But that's what we were worried about with JSN. And so far, so good there.
Yeah, I think it's always with the ball hawks, you're always going to have a little bit of the gambling thing going on, where they've got to find that, perfect line in between where they can land kind of. And okay, I got to learn to dial this back. You remember the clip back in the day of Earl Thomas with Pete in the Charger game, Pete coming to him and being like, no, you got to read this way. You're reading it too much this way. You got to stay on top in the pocket. And then he comes back and he gets a couple interceptions in that very game. And Earl, of course, similarly aligned as far as being very aggressive on the back end and jumping stuff. So it is something you see. I was turning on the tape after the draft. There's SMU tape of TCU's defense against them. Go back and you can watch that. I just found that on YouTube. It's full tape, and he gives up 2 touchdowns over the top in that game. So like, right. and being kind of partly a little bit aggressive, overly aggressive because of it. So that is a little bit there with him on it. I think he'll hold up though, okay, when it comes to size wise, because I think it's more now becoming these safeties need to be a little bit lighter, like the linebackers became lighter, because it's a little bit more about what you do in coverage, more than necessarily what you're going to have to do as a tackler.
All right. So speaking of the tape, let's pull up this clip you've got here. What do we got here? So this is TCU playing. Is that Kansas? I can't make out the jersey.
Yes, you actually are right on that one. Good spot, oh. Brendan. Look at that. Brendan with some Hawkeyes. So a lot of the year in the slot position, but he played all over the place, safety, free safety as well. And I'm trying to grab plays as I can as we're looking at this, to look at plays that really encompass the player and what he brings to the table. And I thought that this play did a really good job of this, because I didn't want to show him in the slot. I want to show him for where he could be in, safety position and how these instincts can work in his favor. As we mentioned in Earl Thomas. So he's in the Earl Thomas position. He is a single high free safety here. You have off coverage on the top and the bottom side with the cornerbacks. This is indicating a pure cover 3 look. What does this tell to the quarterback? If I've got any seam routes, I'm going to be able to attack it as long as I don't have a middle linebacker in the middle of the field, as I would tend to have at times in this coverage, kind of buzzing that spot between the hash marks. But what you see instead, of course, is the linebackers in blitz positions. So they're not going to be in a position to challenge anything in the seam. So from the quarterback's perspective, I can probably attack the seam route here. Remember, his coverage responsibility on this play is cover 3, Brendan, most likely. So he's supposed to stay on top first and foremost. So if he's driving on a route here, back to the gambling, back to the guesser a little bit, he's doing so instinctually, and he's taking away the thing he knows the offense wants to do to us. I know how they want to attack us. I have a responsibility that goes against where they're attacking me. How do I counter that? So watch him on this play. Bam, right up on the seam. And I mentioned, this isn't even an interception. This is another one of those plays where he's not making the interception, but he's knocking it up into the air where his teammate can go and grab it, which is all over his tape as well, as far as these opportunities that he's going to supply. But he's literally supposed to be in the top side, but he recognizes where the quarterback's eyes are, what they're trying to do with him from a route concept, then drive on the route and take it away. And that's what he's going to be able to do. And this is the stuff that I think most attracted Seahawks to him, is this ability in coverage to be this smart and be able to not only cover, but be able to anticipate stuff. because Mike McDonald's defense is going to be a lot about anticipation. We're trying to force the offense to go where we want them to go, and then you anticipate on that. And the quicker you can anticipate it, the quicker you can drive on those kind of routes.
Right. And one thing with the Seahawks last year is, as good as their defense was, they didn't force a ton of turnovers. I know they did a pretty good job in a couple of the playoff games, but overall, they were not a big turnover team. So if they can add somebody that is a ball hawk who just has a natural ability to find the ball, then that is very valuable to this team, because that might be that really could be the difference between them going like having another 14 win season, and them even pushing up into like 15 or 16 wins, because that really does kind of bring everything together perfectly.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a huge thing to provide. And it's if you have a defense that, doesn't have tight coverage or doesn't provide tight coverage opportunities, or for you to, have that safety in that position, because he's going to have to play like a, double coverage, let's say, or you have a spy position on a quarterback and he's got to come down to, well, that you don't have a guy that can be that. Your defense is going to supply this guy into that position to be able to take advantage of this skill set to the ultimate because of it. Say nothing of the team putting teams behind the 8 ball. How many times we played with the lead last year? Come back to it again. Backbreaker players. Price and now into Clark, you've got 2 backbreaker players, can be those players that beyond giving you a collective whole game of great plays, that they can give you that play in the moment, that's the finisher. That's the wrestling move, DDT, or what's a couple of good wrestling moves?
The people's elbow.
The people's elbow. Stone Cold Stunner, right? Go through it. That can be that for you.
Was it the RKO, the Randy Orton one?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that's right. We got 2 RKO kind of players now,
Yeah, so I gave Clark a late second round grade, and we got him in the late second, so I think we pretty much nailed the value. And it's a good pick. I really like it.
Yeah, I've got no problem with it. Similarly to me, it's maybe a little bit of a pull, but again, coming back to it, I can see what they were doing with this draft, and that they weren't just grabbing players randomly with different philosophies and play for every player. There is a spine that connects these players in this draft as far as what they were looking to accomplish and come away from, as we talked about earlier in this show. And this falls in alignment with that.
Right. Yeah. And I think the fact that he's such a good nickel corner is just a little icing on the cake that makes everything fine for me. I don't know what he'll be doing here, but he'll do something, because he's good at a couple different roles.
And he can play that nickel corner. It ain't that he's like, well, he's played it, but if you put him there, he's going to be an over. It's not that. It's that he can play it and he can excel at that position. Mm-hmm. In fact, it may be his long-term best position, quite frankly. We'll come to see.
Yeah, I think that was his best position in college. That's where he played most of his snaps.
It was. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
John Naylor, thank you for becoming a YouTube channel member over on Brandon's side. Maybe a
relation. For that, John?
Maybe a relation to Josh Naylor. I don't know.
Never know.
That'd be cool. Did you see the home run the other day? The one where he like flipped the bat? And...
I did. He pimped it out. Yeah.
That was pretty good. I mean,
these players I'll tell you, these pitchers, as a former pitcher back in my day, it is going to come to a point with them where some of these celebrations are going to be like, these pitchers are being pretty gracious about it. But I'll tell you what, somebody's getting an ear hole here at some point.
Yeah. You can't pick a fight with Josh Naylor though. He's too big.
I wouldn't.
He would just sit on you,
Well, did you see too, the thing with Naylor the other day where he was stealing signs, and then the pitcher got all, yappy. And then Naylor just looked at him and was like, and the guy, he ain't gonna do nothing about it. What?
Yeah. I mean, he's not actually stealing signs. He's just trying to make the pitcher think that he is, I think. I don't believe
it could be. It's fair game anyway. It's like, even if he is, it's not cheating. That's not cheating. Like putting stuff on a baseball is cheating. Shooting yourself up with steroids is cheating. But taking the sign from second because they're not smart enough to go through some signs between the catcher and pitcher, that's their fault, not yours. That's leaving the candy shop open for kids.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, thank you for the 5. Mike is really setting himself up for disappointment with how he is viewing the Cards draft. Does Mike like the Carson Beck pick? Did he talk himself into that?
Yeah, but it's the same thing like you said with it, which I sit there and my head wants to spin around like The Exorcist on its top, which is that you're not wrong on this, but you're not at all. But it's like, this is what you're going to do. Like, well, we'll just come around next year. It's just a 3rd round pick out the door, right? Just burn 3rd round picks. Who needs those? Why is the first pick in the 3rd round valuable? I mean, that's just kind of like a day 3 pick if you really think about it, right? It's like a 5th round pick, huh? It's like, this is just loser organizational mentality to me. No, you don't throw away day 2 picks to the wind. That's not a smart process. No, you don't just take a quarterback to take one. You take one with a plan. You take into account whether or not you got the stuff set up for him to have success or failure. And if it's the failure, you probably want to avoid it. But Brendan, we've had this time-honored discussion for many years, and it's just, to me, what blows me away about it is that you have these teams like the Cardinals that will never learn their lessons. They will never just take their medicine. They're like that just petulant child that just seems to kick and say, no, I want my dessert first. No,
Yeah.
You got to eat your vegetables, man. Got to eat your dinner first.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I mean, I was heavily critical of us taking Jalen Milroe last year. But even there, it feels like at least Milroe has an NFL arm and does have some NFL caliber traits that make him intriguing. Like, I don't think he'll ever be a good quarterback. I don't. But I can see where he would be kind of fun and exciting to have, and maybe he'll find an unconventional way to be there. To me, Carson Beck is just kind of your stock standard noodle-armed quarterback who can make some good reads, but has such a small margin for error to be successful in this league. Like, even though I think that Beck might have a higher floor, there's no ceiling there. So as much as I didn't like the Milroe pick when we made it last year, I think this on some level might be worse.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm in the same place you are with Milroe, of course. But at the end of the day, Milroe's got a absolute gun for an arm, and he's got absolutely as good a mobility as you just about can find for the position. So, like, relating that back to a guy like Carson Beck, and Milroe had multiple years starting coming out. Ty Simpson started like 13 games, whatever it is. I mean, barely a season and worth of football, and which is supposed to be one of those big things for success in the pro level, right, Brendan, is how many starts you've had at the pro college level. And if it's produced, historically speaking, it's shown that not as good a chances of you being a success as a pro. You need that time. You need that development. So I'm in the same place. He is so much more of a fantastically talented player than Beck. And we took him deeper in the 3rd round in a better draft.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, look, you're a fan, fans are going to be fans. They're going to try to pump up what their team does sometimes. I get it. I understand, especially when you're a team as bad as the Cardinals, there's nowhere to go but up. But at the same time, I think that we have to, we being who we are, we can look at this objectively and say, yeah, there was a lot of meat left on the bone here.
It's not to point and laugh. It's to say, man, I feel for the Cardinal fans. I feel for fans that have had to go through bad organizational runs, and this is a tough division. I'm happy to see this division get easier. I am. I'm happy to see him make these decisions. But if I'm looking at it from a Cardinal fan's perspective on it, I can easily see why this is just kind of more of the same that has led us here, and more of the same that's going to lead us to a similar conclusion in the future.
Kevin, thank you for the $4.99. Bud Clark to replace Love. Love replaces Kobe Bryant, meaning would Love take over Kobe's spot? Is that an upgrade from last year? Appreciate this show. Well, so the thing to keep in mind here is that Love missed half the season last year. So if we get more games from Love this year, that is intrinsically an upgrade. But when I think about Love, I think about a guy that may not be here past 2026 because his contract is going to come up in 2027. You may want to move off of that deal, especially if he has another year where he misses more than a couple games. So I'm kind of more thinking about it like, okay, I think Okada and Clark are your safeties next year, possibly, because Okada will still be cheap because he's going to be restricted. And if Okada's good, I think you bring him back on a restricted deal that's going to be reasonable, maybe kind of like the Drake Thomas deal you gave this year if it's a multi-year. And then I think Bud Clark steps in to replace Love, and Love might be moving on. That's kind of what I would project right now.
I think it's very feasible. Yeah. Some of it depends on Love and his health. Had some injuries this year. If you came in had a similar thing this next upcoming season, I can certainly see where that goes. I do think long-term, he's going to be more free safety-ish. Of course, free safety, strong safety is kind of a misnomer in the McDonald defense because the positions are really asked to do very similar things. But yes, I think long-term that's where this could definitely be heading. I mean, I think long-term coming out of this draft, there's a real chance that we get 2 years down the line from this, Brendan, and you've got Bud Clark as your free safety and Fuller as your strong safety. or maybe even a Neil as your strong safety. So that's also the way this could go as well.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on with the safety position next year in the draft, but maybe we get our safety there. It's possible as well. So a couple different ways this can go. But I think Love, this is probably his last year unless he has a really good full season, because that money is starting to get a little notable.
Yeah, agreed.
John Naylor, thank you for the $1.99. Good insights, B&B. Also, Year of Kubiak, Chef Kiss. People are talking about this Year of Kubiak thing that I guess you did that I have not seen yet. I'm going to have to watch that after this show's over.
Yes, if you guys do get a chance, thanks for mentioning that. Bless you there for that, Brendan. If you guys do get a chance for trying a little bit of a different content drop today. So humor, doing little bits, stuff like that. I'm started off with what's going to be the first of a 5-part series here called The Year of Kubiak, just kind of covering Kubiak's whole year and his whole deal. Try to have a lot of fun with a little bit of humor, a little bit of comedy, just kind of throw around just trying some different things on the channel. So if you guys are looking for something along those lines, please do check it out. This dropped before our show about an hour ago and doing pretty well. I think the feedback's been pretty good, which is cool to see. So we got 4 more parts left to go.
Yeah, I do comedy on my channel sometimes too, but it tends to be a lot more dry. And it hits when it hits. But I also get those comments from people who are just like unsubbed. Like some people, like they have no fun, man. They're just like can't you have a little bit of fun with life?
Well, that's what I'm with this. This was much, I like being creative and I like doing creative things. So it was much of an opportunity for me to kind of get back in that a little bit, just to do it for fun. And also something I thought people would enjoy, because it's kind of a unique little story you had and a fun way I thought to kind of do it, especially playing with greens and doing that kind of thing,
Yeah. So yeah, check that out. I will watch it after this show is over. Naylor, again, thank you for the $4.99. After Year of Kubiak, next up Year of NFC West 2026 Roundtable. Would love your version of Jesse, Ode to Sam Darnold with hat, Jake coping with losses, and Z-Bot.
That's a great suggestion, John. I might have to put something like that together this off season. Says we're now in that dead season, so it's a great time to kind of put those little compilation type videos together. So I'll see what I can put together there for it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So
and you're awesome, man. Thank you for the support.
Yeah, thank you, Naylor. Appreciate that very much. All right. Real quick here before we move on, though, I do want to give a shout out to the sponsor here. So we'll be back in about 80 seconds. Do you like sports? If you do, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players' projections and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. I've had a great time using Prize Picks so far. It makes this daily fantasy thing so easy and fun, and it even makes watching the games way more exciting. And with the cool social feeds feature, you can share lineups with your friends and even follow partners to tail or fade their picks. Obviously, we're in the NFL offseason right now, but we've got basketball, baseball, hockey, all kinds of other stuff, so don't be afraid to test things out in whatever sport clicks with you. You can even pick multiple sports in the same lineup and sweat everything at once. And don't forget about team picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So, download Prize Picks, America's #1 sports app. And don't forget, code HMA, that is HMA, gives you $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. All right, welcome back. So let's get to our next player here. This is another player that we have talked about a little bit here. And by the way, he did so much stuff at the Combine, I have to put him on screen as a ticker because it's too long for the just the normal banner. So good for him, by the way. A lot of these players not doing their stuff at the Combine, so cool to see. But Julian Neil, a big, long, lengthy corner from Arkansas. I think originally he was Fresno State before he transferred. Not the fastest guy, but very explosive, some really explosive movement skills. And this feels like the kind of corner that Pete Carroll would have really liked a few years ago when he was in Seattle. And I think he's a corner that Mike McDonald might like for some similar and maybe some slightly different reasons. But this was my favorite pick of the draft. So let me know what you think about it, Brandon.
I like the value from the first 2 picks, where there's a little bit of some questions on, value and where you grab a guy and maybe a little bit of reach and you falling in love. This is one where the value was a lot, truer to me. I do really like the pick a lot as well. I think that he has a chance to give you, collectively what you got from Woolen, I guess, is the collective. They're such different players that you can't really say, well, he's going to fit to what Woolen did, because Woolen's, pure coverage, kind of very little tackling, very little getting off blocks. This guy's all about tearing free of blocks, getting in the run game, being a, violent tackler. And then also gives you some cover stuff where he's maybe not quite as sticky, quite as fleet of foot like we could get from Woolen out there. But I do think that he's got some upside. You got to clean up some things with him from a technique standpoint, where his feet can sometimes get out of whack, especially, and that can sometimes put him in position where, change of direction can be troublesome for him. And that's what gets him as a double dip into real, when he does get into problematic place. But look, he's a very clean corner. He's a complete corner in what he brings. You have a bigger guy now that can be, as I've called him, kind of the big receiver eraser, where I can put him out on big receivers. And if I've got problems with, matchup problems where I'm Drake London against Witherspoon, I don't want to do that as much and try to get a bigger out there, and that I can press that guy on the line of scrimmage with a guy like Neil. He's really good at pressing as well. So it gives you a good press man corner just to kind of fill into that Woolen role and give you the equivalency of Woolen to me as far as, just this season collectively in returns back. What he is long-term, we'll see, and where he lands long-term, we'll see as far as positioning. But just to give you that back where I can get 900 snaps from this guy and I can trust him out there and he's not going to be a liability for me. And these are snaps you need in this defense.
Right. And I don't know exactly how much he's going to play for this team now or even later, because there's a strong possibility that Job ends up being really, really good for us and we don't want to take him off the field very much. But Neil does give us something that we don't have with guys like Witherspoon and Job, who are smaller. He gives you legitimate size. He should be a really, really good run defender and a really good tackler. And I think there is going to be something to be said for within this division. Like, let's say, and I don't know if this is going to be the case, but let's say Mike Evans is still playing well for the 49ers in a year or two. Like, this might be the guy you stick on Mike Evans, because Mike Evans against Devin Witherspoon has some real problems. If you try to put Witherspoon on Mike Evans, you're kind of asking for trouble there. So maybe Neil becomes that guy. And Puka's a good, big receiver as well, right? He's a guy who likes to body opposing corners out. So there's stuff within this division that is going to be hard to deal with for your current group of players. And say whatever you want to say about Woolen, and I know that we certainly have, but I also think that there is something to be said for trying to replace that size that is so hard to find typically. Like, Julian Neil is probably 2 or 3 inches shorter than Woolen, and he's still a 92nd percentile in terms of height for a corner. So, but yeah, Julian Neil, really do like him. Had a middle third round grade on him, so getting him in the late third, I think, is really good. He's going to be very good in press. I know we don't necessarily press a ton, but we do sometimes. Very explosive hips. I don't think he has the movement skills for man, because he's not a very smoother, but we're mostly a zone team, so that's not something that I'm overly worried about.
Yeah, I think you can do a little more in man on that than maybe you might find alignment, but zone's going to be a bit where he's probably got a little bit of a stronger territory at times to where he goes. But I think he can do the man stuff, especially when he gets a good press, and he really solidifies his press really well with great strike accuracy. It has it'll put a receiver into a standstill position at times when he hits it right. So it's a big tool in his kit, and it's hard to run just pure zone off, the press. You got to go basically man when you tend to run that way. But I think he's going to be a good player, Brendan, and the way he plays the run. One thing you have with Woolen out there at times, his team could come out and they go, okay, we're coming out in the football field, and maybe we get Emanuel and Witherspoon to one side of the field, and maybe we can isolate, Woolen here to the other side of the field over here, and now we can attack with the outside zone to Woolen side of the field, because as good as these tacklers are on the Seahawks defense, we've got one side here we can kind of isolate that we can go after, that's vulnerable. Once this guy gets out in the football field, and Job's a pretty good tackler, but still not, he's better than Woolen, but he's not to the ferocious level of, I think, what Neil is, or Witherspoon, or even Warrior for the positions. And that's where now you can add a guy like that out there, and it can make your run defense even better. And it now doesn't really provide those teams really a headway to go out there and find kind of an easy couple of yards.
Right. I think that Neil has a lot to learn, unlike Clark, who already has a really good understanding of how to read an offense and read route combos and read a quarterback. Neil, I think, needs some time to sit in a classroom and kind of learn how to really dissect an offense. But we can afford to give him that time, right? If he doesn't play a snap on defense this year, that's okay. I think we will be fine as long as players stay relatively healthy. Even a guy like Nehemiah Pritchett is there for depth if Neil's not ready. But
Agreed.
I think once he learns, I think once he actually gets his feet underneath him and is ready to go, you've got yourself a very high potential player.
Yeah, I can see that as well within him. And I think he does need a little bit of time to clean some of the stuff up there and get more comfortable out there. But there's definitely some upside here. There's potentially positional flexibility long term. If it doesn't work at corner, you got him to where he can always fall back to safety. Remembering the 2 starting safeties that we rocked last year were former cornerback converts. So we'll see where it goes with him. But I like him a lot as a player. The value is really good. He wasn't that far away from some of those corners that were in that top of the second round that we looked at. His talent was not as far away. And his upside wasn't as far away from those guys. So he's going to be I think he's going to be a good player and a good fit to this defense.
Yeah, and I think in this defense, this McDonald defense, we're kind of moving towards being positionless, kind of like a basketball team that just has 5 guys out there, and it's not clear who's doing what at any given time. I think this secondary is kind of the same way, where he really wants a bunch of guys who can do anything from snap to snap. That seems to be what his dream is.
Yeah, I get the same feeling. I think Mike's trying to anticipate a little bit where things are going to evolve to, and hard not to see in Mike that he goes, man, this is what's made my defense so good, is its ability to be so unpredictable and fool offenses. Shouldn't I just continue to lean more into this into the future? I think if I was in Mike's shoes, I'd probably say, yeah, to your point, making even things more positionless as it pertains to the secondary.
Right. Okay, so we got this right here. I can't tell who that is. Is that Auburn?
I don't think it's Auburn. It might be, but I don't think that was Auburn. No.
Okay. Yeah, I can't make that one out. All right. But yeah, we got a clip here. Let's walk through it.
So we got our clip here, which is one of our compassers of the player and what you kind of get from him. And I think a lot of the feisty competitive stuff, and I'm not going to give up an inch thing, is kind of on display here on top of that press stuff that he can do. So it's not a fancy rep where he's taking the ball away down the football field here by any measure, but this is where he can lay in such a good press. Go back and watch this press and look at the receiver and what happens to him here. He's a yard behind the line of scrimmage as he's coming back on a short drag route. Like, do you know how hard it is to press a guy to where he's a yard behind the line of scrimmage on a short drag? And then comes up and makes the tackle all the way across the field. So takes the angle, doesn't get caught in the trash. They're running a mesh concept going back across the field meant to get him caught in the trash. Gets through all of that. First presses him off the line of scrimmage, back a yard behind the line. You can see the sticks at the top of the screen there, Brendan. So if you look at the sticks here, okay, guy's running the route across here. See the sticks at the top, which indicate where the line of scrimmage was? So he's literally a yard, almost 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage off of the initial press.
Right.
Not a fancy play, but just this is what he can do to you, where he makes it a long day at the office for wide receivers. He's going to beat guys up. He's going to get that press solidified, and he can still chase in space even after he hits that press. He doesn't then stay at a standstill and he's kind of lost. So again, not one of his, he has even better reps on the highlights, but this was just one that I thought really did well to accomplish what he brings. Competitive spirit, never going to give up. This is a drag route. A lot of cornerbacks on drag routes will just kind of go, okay, I'm going to give up a little 3-yard completion. It's a short drag. What am I supposed to do? But here's a guy who's ends up giving up not even a yard on the play. He ends up basically tackling him right at the line of scrimmage. That's a pretty phenomenal play when you consider this went all the way across from the short side of the field to the long side of the field on a college football field, which is hella long. So yeah. You're muted.
Yeah, but anyway, what I just said was if he doesn't make that play, there's not really anybody else back there that I saw. So that's a big play if he doesn't make that tackle.
Yeah, they're running man concepts, so there's not a zone guy sitting back there in his space at that point to pick it up, and it's all on him to get it done. So yeah, it's where he's got that sense of you want that hyper competitiveness from your corners. I don't know if Woolen was a hyper competitive guy, supremely talented. Was he hyper competitive? Probably not. But when you get that hyper competitiveness on a guy like a Richard Sherman, for instance, it can really just gives them that little extra juice for the position. Sometimes it feels like.
Right. So yeah, really like this pick. I think it's a good value, maybe even a little bit of a steal because like I said, my initial read on him was middle third round. And I think that his role in 2026 will be minimal, but I think that after 2026 and you go into 2027, Maybe he's pushing Josh Jobe, because I do think he's more talented than Josh Jobe. Jobe is proven to be a good player. That talent alone is not going to get Neil into the starting job. But I do think that there is something to be said for that. And then after 2027, Jobe is probably moving on at that point, or at least there's a good chance of it because of the way NFL contracts work. And then Neil's your starting corner for a couple years, and it all comes together really well.
Yeah, that's about the time too. You got to spend the money on Emanuel. So Witherspoon's contract in full bloom at that point. Emanuel gets paid, so you probably need to go a little cheaper for the other cornerback position. To your point, with even Jobe making marginal money, somebody's got to be a little bit less. And so that's probably the way that goes at that time. Seahawks setting things up a little bit in advance here with these picks. A little shift on this third one is kind of it's not just a diametric shift. It's like the shift as they went into day 3 of like, okay, instant production. Then this guy, some instant production, but some of this is the long-term future. And then some of these picks a little bit all about the future, a little bit conceptually how they sort of ran this draft.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, thank you for the $4.99. Kyle Shanahan vacationing at Nude Beach in Thailand. Elephant walks by and asks how you breathe through that little thing. I've not heard that one before. Question, 26 draft, more chess pieces versus NFC West? Are you just talking about like Neil and Clark being kind of like extra chess pieces to put on the field defensively? I guess, but I'm not quite sure what the question is here.
Yeah, I think, more than it being chess pieces is, I guess, first the NFC West, it's just more chess pieces for the NFL in general here. Like, this is just more for you to go at these different teams and be able to deal with these different teams in other ways and have extra pieces that take you over the top. Really, the Seattle Seahawks in 2026, to me, Brendan, you had stars and you had difference makers and you had all pros, but it was truly a team that represented the collective as to what made you great. And you're trying to build up that collective. And you're not just doing so by like, let's get a good starter here and then let's get a good starter here. Those are kind of already on place on this team. And so you are kind of putting more into this, to your point on the chess pieces of how do we get these sort of things that are going to be attributes of the team that can help out in specific positions, because there is not as much of the need there. We don't have as much of the hole there. There may not be the guy in the draft to go fill this hole if we had that hole there. So they went a little bit more, to me, creatively into how they approached this draft, and I get it. I understand it completely, and I do think from that side of it, you're getting guys that give you production instantly for next year in some way, shape, form, or another. All 3 of these guys we talked about are going to see snaps next year. They're going to see the field. They're going to have a role. Neil and Clark's case, special teams is just the first foundational layer, and it's going to continue to build above that. And so that to me speaks to what they tried to do in this draft in general. And it is also a bit different than what a couple of our rivals did in this draft, where I think the production on some of those guys, you're going to have to really wait for it.
Right. And don't forget, players probably get hurt. Like most of the players in our secondary last year missed at least one game. Witherspoon missed time. Love missed a bunch of time. Kobe missed time at the end of the season. I think Jobe missed a little bit of time. Woolen had the concussion. Like players are going to get hurt. So they'll play a little bit at the very least.
Agreed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Remember, we are in a load management era with our football.
Very true.
Mm-hmm. All right, now we're going to get into some of the day 3 stuff, and this might go a little bit quickly because we're going to have less to say here. I have very little to say about some of these guys. I do have quite a bit to say about Bo Stevens, though. He was our first pick. We actually gave up a future 4th rounder to acquire the pick to draft Bo Stevens, which I'm not the hugest fan in the world of giving up a 4th rounder next year to get a 5th rounder this year. But one thing I will say, the Seahawks are going to have a lot of picks next year, probably too many, because when you have too many picks, the problem you run into is too many guys you draft don't make the team because there's no room on your team. So I do think giving up a future asset for a player now does have some benefit to it. And I think the Seahawks are probably going to trade more picks in the coming months to acquire players maybe at the trade deadline, and possibly even package picks to move up so they get fewer better players rather than an abundance of players that they're mostly going to just have to cut. So I'm cool with that. I'm cool with it. In a vacuum, I'm not, but in this situation, I get it. So Bo Stevens, Iowa, 23, mostly played left guard in college, played a little bit of right guard. Very, very short arms. That's kind of the first thing that jumps out to you here. He's got some of the shortest arms in the history of the position. And he's a pretty unremarkable athlete. The thing with him is just he has a very deep understanding of how to play in zone. His cerebral understanding of how to get to landmarks in zone blocking is very strong. So how do you feel about both the trade to get the pick to get Stevens and then Stevens himself?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I think if you're going to have any reasons, if you're going to have a player you're going to look to target in a draft and say we're giving a future draft capital and it's for an offensive lineman, I'm probably always going to just in general, even getting before you to the evaluation of the lineman himself, I'm going to like that. You know me, I've got a soft spot for, readdressing this offensive line, turning it into a strength, making one of the strongest units in the football. I'm hyper concentrated on that as a potentiality. I'd love to see it. And this kind of trade gets you into the direction of being able to accomplish that, by rounding this offensive line right, by putting true competition in the room, not just settling on the parts that you have. As you said, he's a pure zone fit. No sacks given up in 2 years. Frankly, no sacks given up in 3 years. He just didn't start for 3 years. He was only a partial starter in year 3. They only throw like a 2-to-1 rate at times out there in Iowa. So that's also a factor to think about with the pass protection is that they just don't throw a lot. It's a hyper running team, as you'll see in college football. But his zone acumen is through the roof. His understanding of timing of double team blocks, peeling to the second level, blocking in space. Yes, he's not the best athlete, but there are athletes that are great athletes that have horrible targeting systems at the second level and moving in space who are completely uncoordinated despite them being great athletes. So that, sure, they move, but they always end up falling over like a trash can tipping every time that they have to be asked to move 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. Well, in this guy, you have a guy that can move out in space fluidly and that he keeps his feet and he lands his block and his targeting systems are great. And so he also brings in here a lot of power, some right guard fluidity, and having played it prior as you're hoping he can be there in the long term, some potential returns to this year in the way of if you have an injury, I think to the left guard position, this is going to be the first guy off the bench to fill in for you for Zabel. So you've got better reinforcement, I think, there than you probably would have had with a Cable do. You've improved the roster there in that way. So I think he's got a lot of, safety to him. Is he going to have a high floor? No. But does he have some high ceiling to him, which is part of why I think Seattle packaged these picks? Yeah, I think he kind of does. And he's going to fit really well into the system, and he's going to push Bradford year one.
So you do think that he can play right guard in the NFL? Because that's the thing I've been a little bit going back and forth on. Like, I don't know what he is. Is he left guard, right guard, even center? I'm not sure how this ends. How do you feel like it ends?
I think the nuance of the discussion is that he's probably more of a natural left guard than he is a right guard, but the baseline of play that Anthony Bradford has given us is so not necessarily hard to overcome that this guy being a pure fit to this system may allow him an inroads to overtake it. I'm not one of those people trying to bang, and I know you're not either on taking apart Bradford and going along with the group think on this, that he's somehow like the worst right guard in the NFL. Not that, but can this guy be over him being a top 40-ish, guard where he's probably at top 45-ish guard? Can he be better than maybe? I can see him with his fact that he started so many games of coming in a system that's going to run the ball a lot, to being a guy. He does have the power and strength to do it. He does have the size at 315 to do the right guard thing. Sometimes those left guards, Brendan, you get the sub 300 pounders and you're like, well, there's no way I'm moving that guy over in front of the one tech who's 330, 340. That's just not going to work. But he is at 315. I mean, that's what he tested out at the combine. So if you look at him on tape, he probably plays more around 320-ish. So he does have some size stuff, 6'5", to kind of work to handle the nose tackles over there, but you're onto it. I mean, it's probably better suited as a left guard, but I don't think it's horrible at the right guard, and we just don't have a lot of baseline to see him over there because he only, I think, and it was like 2 years ago. It wasn't even during when he's had his best starts, where he played right guard. It was when he was just getting acclimated into the process.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I'm skeptical that Stevens is going to take Bradford's job this year. And part of me wonders is because his arms are so short, I do wonder if he ends up at center, because the shorter your arms, the more you tend to slide inside. I am worried about that because, again, first percentile. They are very close to the shortest arms in the history of the position for the combine. And I know that the NFL is kind of weird because sometimes a player goes to the combine as one position and everybody knows they're going to be another position. So it's not perfect. But 31 and an eighth is a big problem, I think. And I wonder about that. It makes me wonder if he should be a center and then we trade Oluwatimi. Like that would be something I would be interested in. But could be left guard, could be right guard. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an option on the table. I wouldn't throw it away as a possibility. So I think you've got a lot of options with him in that way, and that he's got the versatility to be able to move into those different places potentially.
Yeah, well, one comparison I made with Stevens is it's a little like Oluwatimi. Oluwatimi's not a good athlete either, but he played so much zone in college at Michigan that he understood those concepts really well. So he was able to do it competently, even though he still wasn't on the level of the truly great zone blockers. Do you kind of feel like Stevens is similar?
Yeah, I think that's a fair outlook on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so he also doesn't really have the strength or power to succeed outside of zone. So zone is the only way he's going to be a good player in this league, I think. Going to have to find a place that allows him to do that, which this place should be. And that Iowa offensive line factory they've got, like, it's both great and it's also a little bit suspicious because it does make players look better than they actually are, but it also does prepare them to at least be competent NFL players. So I'm a little bit of a mixed bag there, but I think Stevens is an appropriate pick in the fifth round where we got him. And even if he's never a starter in this league, and I'm skeptical about him ever being a good starter, there's nothing wrong with coming away with a good backup, especially if he's somebody that can play multiple positions in the fifth round of this draft. So I'm still on board with that.
Yeah, I think the value is very good here, and I think I might have a little bit of an eye more higher upside to him than you might as far as the outlook, as far as thinking he could be a solid starter in this league. I certainly don't think star potential is there, but I think he'd be a solid guy. I think I like his upside more than Olatimi, though. But I think you're absolutely right that there's equivalency there as far as the athletes they are, especially fits into zone systems where you tend to want more of that. But I do think I had him just a little bit below the rung of some of those guys. You know, he wasn't a Pregnon, Dunker, or Bazantes, Rutledge's level. He wasn't in that spot of things, but the next guy down at the top of the next group down, that's where I would have had Bo Stevens. And I think that there is some safety in grabbing him where there's not as much the bust factor there to it, to your point on, hey, at least you got a solid starter, bare minimum, solid backup, bare minimum. I think that he's absolutely giving you that. That's just coming in the door square one kind of thing. So,
So yeah, good pick in my book. Let's see what you got here with this clip. Let me get the banner off screen. There we go.
So I got a couple clips I wanted to show with it. And these are just show as much just some of the intelligence of him in space, and so much of zone is you're not blocking the player, you're blocking his space, you're blocking to how you know the play's breaking down and what you need to do to kind of clog the hole, so to speak. You know, the player that's causing the problem nearest to your responsibility, are you taking care of that? So we're looking at 70 here. He's going to be the left guard on this play. That's to the top side of your screen, just to the right of the left tackle. I want you to concentrate in on 70 and watch him on this play. We're going to run a couple plays here, Brendan, because I'm going to get you hyped on Bo. I'm going to get you sold on Bo here. So first, bang, 2 for 1. So he takes his man off the boat here. This is him leading out in front, 70. Okay.
Right.
First, he's a good 7 yards down the field here. Lands the block, takes his man off his feet, senses this guy in front of him, and watch him kind of just spin around and stick himself in front of the blocker there. See that?
Right.
Gets a 2 for 1 and ends up springing this play for a nice big play for the quarterback. But it's just that smarts in space a little bit, Brendan, where he's just got a good sense always, even in just stuff happening like this around him, of kind of how to get your body into kind of the right spot in the right place. So again, just watch him out in front. I'm going to play one more clip of him here, Brendan. I want to show you of some similar stuff here. Hold on. Let me share it with you, man. That's the least I can do, huh?
All right. No problem. I am game for that. All right.
Okay, so again, left guard, top of your screen here. I want you to concentrate in on 70. Just bust out the big run. And can you see, watch as he's going through here. He's making sure everything's kind of cleared as he goes through. So we go through first, make sure I got my guy clearing out the hole that this thing's going through. Okay, everything's good to go there. I'm going to get down to the next block. Is this sealed up? 58's got this on point. I can let that guy go. I come down to the second level and get the final guy sealed. So see, he's first coming down 58. Oops, do I got to pick up near man? Nope, 58's got it. I can read in the moment 58's got it. Then I'm going down to that second level block. This is the stuff that springs the big runs. So many times on tape when you're watching this kind of block, Brendan, 58 and 70 are going to end up on that block right there. They're going to get stuck on that block, and the backside guy's going to come around and then pick up the running back and then tackle him for a 5-6 yard gain. But every step of the way, there's two separate blocks he could have gotten stuck on before he gets to his third one on this play. And this brings a big play, and that's where that zone acumen and that understanding. These are pretty blocks, Brendan. It's just that he's doing the right thing he's supposed to do. He's making the smart read in the moment. You know what I mean? Can you think in a snapshot moment of what you need to do? Do you have to think about things beforehand and have a whole plan in place? Or can you just in the moment react to what's going on in front of you? And that's what I thought this play showed off really well. But his tape is kind of, I think, littered with that type of stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's all good. That's encouraging. That's kind of the thing we talk about where like the spirit is willing. The flesh might be a little bit weak, but I don't think it's critically weak. He's not a terrible athlete. He's just kind of mediocre.
Well, and you're seeing him all those plays, getting out in front, out in space, targeting systems right, comfortable athlete, moving with 315 pounds. Not a guy that's like those big fat guys out there that, if they're not on if they get a little bit off on one foot, they'll tip over. And that's a real thing. And I think some Bradford runs into a lot, where he's a little bit top heavy and he'll fall over sometimes. And this guy, that's not going to happen with. And that's a part where you got to take into account. This athletic scores are great. But if that guy, Bradford's got great athletic scores. I wouldn't say he moves well out in space. He's kind of more hit or miss. And so it's all of that builds a guy that moves and can block out and that's a fundamental building block of the zone system, is having offensive linemen that can do this very thing.
Right. And I do believe that with the addition of Stevens, this team now has 11 offensive linemen that they probably want to have here. So I think you are going to have to trade one of them, because you've got 4 tackles, right? Cross, Lucas, Kite, and Josh Jones, right? And I think you need all 4 of those guys. Maybe you can let Kite go, but the team seems to really like him.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Guard, those guys stay.
Yeah. Guard, you've got Zabel and Bradford. And then you've got Cable Dew, you've got Christian Haynes, and now you've got Stevens. Now, Haynes you could just cut, I guess, because it seems like it's done with him, but maybe not. And Cable Dew, this team seems to really be into, and he's a really good athlete. So there's something fun there. I think you want to keep him around. And then you have Oluwatimi and Sundell, which is why I advocated maybe you trade Oluwatimi and move Stevens to center or Haynes to center, and then things are kind of balanced.
I think you let them all battle it out, and you get through the end of training camp, and to your point, at that point, see what you can go out there and find as a trade partner. We had a couple of years ago, we picked up an extra, pick in this draft, I think, from the trade we made with the Browns on a center. Like, there's certain positions you're going to have a hard time moving in the training camp and finding suitors for, and you might end up just having to release that guy. Offensive line tends to be one because it's in so much of a need, and so few teams are actually moving guys. That if you got some value there, even if it's to get back a 6th or 7th round pick, I'm not saying prime returns, but an Olatimi pulling that back in return for a team that's in desperate need, you can see where that pops up, and then you're afforded that time to let camp play it out, and for this all to play out, which is what you want to do. Is I want to build my strongest offensive line. You're right. Somebody's going to probably have to go, and survival of the fittest. I'm going to probably have to let go actually a pretty good player, but I've also built the best possible offensive line on the back of that approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that shoot, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. My bad. That doesn't happen very often on this show, people. It does not happen, but we've been processing a lot of information over the last week or so. But yeah, I think that there is probably a move that needs to be made there. And what I was going to say was, I think Oluwatimi could start on like the Ravens or the Titans right now. If you look at their center position situations, they're kind of destitute. So there's going to be a market out there.
I agree. I think something could come up. We're in that era where teams are still scrambling when it comes to their offensive line.
Mm-hmm. Ender, thank you for the $10. I work on a drill rig on the top of Alaska, and I appreciate you two guys talking Hawks.
Well, thank you for that, Ender, man. Hopefully not we're having to work too hard if you got to be out in Alaska. It was a pretty chill job, hopefully. But appreciate you for that, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just watched Deepwater Horizon not that long ago, so now I'm thinking about that. It's like, hopefully it's not that.
I'm already scared to death of the ocean, throwing in fire and explosions on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you.
Yeah. It was
couldn't pay me enough.
Yeah, it was interesting. I can't remember the name of the director, but him and Wahlberg, they made like 3 movies in 2 years. They were all kind of the same movie. There was Deepwater Horizon, there was Lone Survivor, and then there was Patriots Day. It's all like these, quasi true stories about real life disasters and tragedies and stuff. Like they had their niche there for a minute there, and they were pretty good at it.
When it's hidden, I guess it's hidden, right? So yeah, you're right about that. They definitely had they were getting into a little bit of the cookie cutter place of
Hmm.
things, but yeah, they're on a heater a little bit with that.
Yeah. Somebody in chat will remember what the director's name is, but it was like he put him out on an
Berg.
assembly line. Yeah. Peter Berg. Yes. Peter Berg. Wow. There you go. Knew it off the top of your head.
I know
Yeah.
Peter Berg from No Mo Mr. Nice Guy in the horror movie back in the
Yeah.
late 90s. Serial killer comes back to life and haunts him.
Oh, really? Yeah. There's something respectable about the ability to make a movie quickly because these days everything takes an eternity to make. Like they take 3 years between shows of TV, seasons of TV shows. It's like, like I've rewatched the Dollars trilogy over the last week. Those
Hmm.
three movies were made back to back to back in 3 years. Like they just churned them out. And it's like, what excuse do you guys have? Come on.
Oh, I know. Yeah. This stuff's gotten take way too much time. And then it's not
Yeah,
as good.
right. Okay. So now we're going to get into guys that I'm really not going to have a ton to say on for the most part, like Emmanuel Henderson Jr., not a guy I scouted pre-draft. I looked at him a little bit. Seems like he's mostly a special teamer more than he is a receiver. Like as a receiver, he's probably just a slot only guy, kind of small, not a ton going on here. Decent speed, but I think he's got some value as a returner and maybe a gunner. Maybe he's a Derek Young replacement, but he's got to beat out Cody White. And Cody White's a guy who's actually made some plays as receiver and on special teams. So I'm not convinced that Henderson can do that. So I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah, it's probably my least liked pick of the draft when it comes down to it because like you just said, I don't know if there's really a pathway to this guy making the team. And, you brought up a good point about the 12 picks in next year's draft and having to release players. And this is not theoretical. We've been down this territory before with John having a championship roster, having too many picks, and not enough roster spots. You not only released one, but two wide receivers that were taken in the fourth round during the Legion of Boom era. I'm talking released before you even got to game one, released after training camp. Fourth round picks you drafted that year, not 2 years, not 3 years down the line, that season. So this has happened before with John where he has taken guys and released them. And this is one I worry about with him, Emanuel. I will say, I think I have a little more, I have a little bit more hope on him being able to maybe play on the outside than you might on this, because I think that he has just such easy speed and good route running that could potentially give him a pathway out there. The 4.4 speed's legit on the field. Like he's one of those easy burner guys where it's that first 10 yards of space just gets eaten up so fast. And then he really challenges those corners to stay on top, which just really opens him up on some of his route running, underneath at that point. So I think he's got a little bit of something there. The special teams value does give a little bit extra on the top. I think though that you probably hit the nail on the head pretty good with this, with the fact that where you're at with the receiving core right now, Bobo being here for sure, and Cody White, Ricky White, I don't know if those two guys might not be better players when it's all said and done all around than what you get from Henderson. But I mean, he's been around the block. He's had guys like Jaden Daniels, Jalen Milroe, then at Kansas this past year, throwing him the ball. So he's been very well traveled, and that does show up in his route running to me, Brendan, but also not a great contested catcher necessarily, not necessarily a guy that's an easy, smooth hands guy, it's not full on. He's fighting his hands, but it is a little bit, there's some drops there,
Yeah. Apparently, by the way, we just got a little bit of information from the Seahawks themselves. They are moving Tyrone Broden to cornerback. So,
Isn't he 6'7"?
yeah, he's 6'5", but he can't catch. So you put him at corner. It's like, okay, it's okay that you can't catch, man.
All right. Hey, 4.37 coming out, right? On Tyrone.
Right.
So,
but that maybe clears room for Henderson on the practice squad. I think that's reasonable. So maybe that's the play here.
Yeah. Well, he's got Broden beat on the special team side of that all day long. So,
yeah. And also, there's maybe there's some motivation to have your Reek Woolen replacement with Broden as well. Somebody that can physically resemble what Woolen gave you with speed and size. So at least you can have that guy in practice, even if you're not going to have him in game, because let's be real here. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, he was never going to probably work as a receiver. So
yeah,
it's good as anything else. Give him a try over there.
All right. So you don't have a clip for Henderson?
I do.
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and just run with it because I don't have much else to say. I haven't really done a deep dive on him yet. He seems fine for what he is, but I think what he is mostly a special teamer.
I want to do 2 clips here really quick, Brennan. This one's just a little bit of the ability and as a route runner. And there's a lot of stuff from the slot here. This is going to be a little bit of a wiggle corner route here from Jaden Daniels. And so just going to watch him here on this. He's operating again from the slot here. So run it through first here so you can kind of see it. So he is that guy on the full outside here when you're watching him, aligned to that outside. Great. He's got a nice little release package. It isn't special, but he's got a little bit of something there. See a little jab step there that he's got? That's pretty nice. He's got that little release there to clear him, and then he creates the instant separation, and Jaden Daniels puts a pinpoint pass in the back of the end zone here. So this one's from a little bit back on this one, but you can see the separation, see the easy speed here on the play and what he brings. And then this is another one that I think shows kind of some similar stuff here.
Kind of looks like one of the Torrey Horton touchdowns from last year, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, kind of exactly. Sort of that little, you sort of set up the route. He's kind of wiggling through and then gets it to it's not a pure corner route. It's sort of like hop inside, sell the end, and then get it out to the corner. It's kind of almost a bit of a freelance, a bit of a route. You're getting to the corner eventually is kind of the route, there. Now, at the bottom of your screen here, look at how far the off coverage is where you can barely see the shadow of the player. Well beyond 10 yards on the bottom side of the screen. See his little head there, shadow of his head there in the screen? That shows you the threat of the speed here from this guy. That shows you that this guy's got real deal speed that these corners, when they're going up against him, have to worry about. And it sets up the route running because now the post route's completely there to be taken. And it's all really set up as much as there's too much cushion from the cornerback on this play for a post. There's no way he can ever get back up in and recover on this. But it's set up by that speed. And then nice little cut to the corner. Look at how badly he gets him spinning in circles here, Brendan. Look at him. Look at the corner here. Spinning around in circles. Doesn't know which way is which. It's a well-run route when you get the corner to spin in the wrong direction. It's a badass route just to get him to spin, but then to spin in the wrong direction on top of it where he's not even spinning towards you, but spinning away from you.
The kids call that ankles.
He got the ankles good there. I think that kid's going to have to go get something wrapped up. So the easy speed, the ability to decently on this. He's not a complete, tugboat as far as when he's changing. Or he's got some quickness and sharpness to the cuts when he comes out of that. Maybe some of this to me gives him a little bit of some hope there to play on the outside long term. But slot may also be the future as well with him with the shorter arms. Not a lot of guys with the long arms playing on the outside.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's see here. After Henderson, I got a little bit I can say about this one, Andre Fuller, because this was a guy I scouted because the Seahawks kind of tipped their hand with their interest in Fuller because he was a top 30 visit. So Toledo corner did actually go to the combine, did do some stuff there. Nothing too remarkable with his testing. The broad jump was good, but he's a bigger corner. He's actually 200 pounds, 6'1", kind of short arms, but not critically short. And his one season starting at Toledo, his coverage numbers were actually really good. He gave up less than 5 yards a target. So what do we think of Andre Fuller?
There's some similarities with him and Neil in certain respects. I think he's not quite as big, but there's, really good run defenders, really good at getting off blocks, instinctual just first and foremost in that part of the game, can play a variety of different coverages, much like Neil, brings that feisty competitive nature to play that you feel on every snap where he just gets after it. There's never, to me, when you look at the tape of these two guys, you're never left wanting for a lack of effort. They're going to give you what they got every snap. That's kind of how you feel from them. And Fuller's just, that kind of player. I think he as well, he's got, you like to use that reference, the click and close. I really love his click and close and off coverage, where he's off coverage, drop, feels the route coming underneath them, drives on that route, and you can feel a little bit of some explosiveness. I mean, the man did almost an 11-foot broad, Brendan, which shows some of that I can just go in and come right back downhill and get back after it. He really does read things, I think, nicely in coverage. You can have two-man routes running through his zone, and he's going to pick the right man when you're trying to flood him in that way. A guy that, because of his tackling and because of how he plays the run game, definitely has to be a landing spot where worst case scenario, you can eventually put him into safety. And I think he'd be a fine safety for you back there. But I like the kid a lot. I thought the value was tremendous getting him where you got him in this draft. And I think it's going to be very hard. Nehemiah Pritchett and Igben, you can say the name, Noah. they're going to have a hard up-road battle, I think, with these two corners that we brought in, because these guys are going to come in and they're going to tackle like demons. And I just think Mike McDonald's going to like that a lot. And the two questions you have about Igbenogany and Nehemiah Pritchett is tackling. And these aren't just small questions with these two guys. These are major questions. Pritchett came forward in the coverage last year. We still have some questions a little bit when it comes to him as a tackler.
Yeah, it's Igbenogany. I always just remember it rhymes with mahogany, and then it kind of just flows. Igbenogany.
There we go.
We won't have to. I have a feeling we're not going to have to memorize that one because I don't think he's going to be here when the rubber meets the road.
Igba not going to be around here much longer.
There was a linebacker the Seahawks signed some years ago for special teams, Joel. I actually took a little bit of time to learn how to pronounce his last name because it was a very complicated one, and then he didn't make the team anyway. And it was like, well, I could have done anything else with that time. So I learned a lesson there, I guess. But Igbenogany kind of flows, so it's actually not that bad. I think the linebacker's name was like E.A. Boniwe or something. It was really, really off the wall.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah. But yeah, Andre Fuller, like you said, he's got good size. He's very disruptive at the catch point. He's strong. I could see him maybe playing a little bit of safety. My issue is he seems like mostly a press corner. And I think when you take him out of press, he does lose effectiveness. So I don't know how well he'll work in this defense. He's not exactly a smooth mover. He doesn't have enough speed to keep up with speedier receivers. So I don't see a complete corner here, but I do think he's worthy of being the 7th round pick that he was. So I don't have any issue with the pick. I just think that there's a little bit of a limit here. I know some people are really high on his potential. I'm not quite there yet, but I like him well enough.
Yeah. And I think there's just a couple other parts I might like a little bit better. And I do think the landing zone of having the safety as a fallback with him that's truly there for how he plays is the run and how he can get off blocks and just his instincts in general on the field, I think are really nice. And I think he's a fit to this defense. He's a Mike McDonald type of corner to me, and that you can do a variety of things with him. Might be more comfortable in press, but I think that he can do the off coverage stuff too. Mm-hmm. And I do think he makes this team. I think him and Neil become those two corners on the pecking order. Whether they keep 6 or not, we'll see.
I think I agree. I think that he does make the team because this team seems to value something there. And he might be one of their guys that they're like, look, he's not going to do a lot as a rookie. We're cool with that.
Yeah, admittedly.
Right. So let's check out this clip from, what is this? The MAC conference of college football. The MAC.
That's right.
I love them.
The major MACtion.
Yep. Yeah, it's Thursday night and there's nothing else to do. So you throw on some MAC football.
You're saying, is this the only game on? Really? That's all we got? That's all we got?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what impresses me about an outside corner that can run and tackle and do that type of stuff, that stuff shows up all over his tape for sure. This kind of play to me shows really in a major way how this comes to life. You're in press coverage. You're in a position to be close as it is at the top of the screen to getting blocked and just getting out of this play. Many outside corners in this kind of play say, hey, this is an inside run. This is a defensive lineman problem. This is an off-ball linebacker problem. This is not a cornerback problem. But instead, watch what he does on this play. Nearly gets into the backfield to make a tackle for loss as an out, not as a slot corner. And I understand things are a little condensed here because of where they are in the field and where they are with the hash mark. But this is an outside corner coming to making this play in the backfield. That's anticipation, willingness to tackle, understanding what's coming with the down and distance from the looks. There's some film study involved in making this kind of play, Brendan. But this is what he is. I mean, this is where he could be, to me, a real demon if you need him as far as a safety is in that way, because I think he's going to, all that run game stuff's going to translate. Got one other one I wanted to show, which just wanted to kind of highlight both, but also
that receiver was just standing out there like he was like Mark Sanchez.
He sold, as the kids would say, he sold on that one. That's effort. The coach is going to come back and say, what were you doing there? Like you've got to lay a hand on him there. You can't give him a free pass into the backfield. Here, I want to show up on a lot of times teams attack Seattle Seahawks with a lot of the crossing routes. That's one of the places that's a little bit of susceptibility with our defense and our zone coverages. Of course, for years, that would be a problem in the Carroll defense, especially the cover 3. You know, the crosser and the seams are just big vulnerable parts that you can have on the defense because your corner's an off coverage, Brendan, and he's supposed to play to depth. So you think about it, you're attacking with that sort of crosser all the way across the field when this guy first and foremost has to be to here in his first, responsibility. So it's hard even if you're running what's called a man match, where it's like, well, I'm in cover 3, but if he goes across the middle of the field, now it's going to turn to a man coverage route. Well, it's hard for a corner to do that. Ask him to do 2 for 1. And that's what you do here. He's first back. I think then he drives on this, comes up underneath it, and goes and makes the pick underneath on the play.
Wow, that was like this is a Woolen play against Detroit back in his rookie year.
Exactly. Or if you remember as well, the first 49er game of the season with Josh Jobe. Remember, Josh Jobe was on parasol, and he had to make a very similar play on a crossing route for an interception in that game as well.
Yeah.
So this is something with him where it's just, here he is in off coverage. You're not impressed. You're not in, and he's kind of running. He might be running man all the way here rather than man match, just by the way that he doesn't do they usually do that little bounce step, Brendan, if they're going to the cover 3, if they're dropping to depth. See how he goes more to the middle of the field and he's playing the guy right off the jump, probably more man. But still really well run. That's a hard route to cover. That's a lot of space and a lot of ground you got to run. You don't know the route's coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then makes a play on the ball on top of it, which he's got some ball skills in addition to everything else.
Yeah, I think he had 11 passes defense last year, which is quite a bit for college ball. That's impressive. That's almost won a game.
He's got a little something there. I ain't calling him Deion Sanders, but he's got a little something there,
So yeah, I'm on board with taking him in the 7th. I'm not as big a fan of him as some others, but I think that's a good pick, and I think that he's got something he can offer here.
Yeah, I feel you there. I think he makes the team for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. We got Devin Eastern here, Minnesota, defensive tackle, although I think really he's a nose tackle. He is pretty big, 315 pounds, 6'5". And one thing that really stands out here, a lot of these low-level nose tackle guys end up having super short arms. This guy's got long arms, 34 inches. So that'll get it done. He had a really nice broad jump too, did not have a very good vert, so there is some mixed signals here. I did not have a chance to really deep dive on Eastern very much. It does seem like that he is a pretty credible nose tackle option, somebody who can eat up space and hold his ground in the middle, but I don't have a ton to speak to here. So you go ahead and drive the bus on this one.
Kind of get some sort of like Akeem Hicks kind of vibes from him. The former Bear player, big defensive tackle in there, just a big old problem in that he's a big man, long arms, big hands, good size player inside, but then kind of nimble for that size. Just a little bit of some quickness to him. It's not, I wouldn't say that's a foremost skill that he's got, but just that this guy, this big, this long, shouldn't be kind of this quick off the ball, that he's able to provide that as. And so a guy that actually gives you nose tackle with some penetrating ability there, as well as still being able to, in my opinion, root down and hold the line as far as a run defender goes. I don't think there's one he does necessarily well more than the other. You may have a little bit more questions to him on the root down than you would on typical nose tackles, but he's not bad on it. It's not a glaring part to his game that leaves you wanting. Just like he's a little bit more sometimes in the attack mode, athleticism, get him upfield, let him get downhill on you a bit. He's got a little bit that flashes in his game at times, but I think he's got plenty of strength, plenty of power there to develop into that guy that can be the root down guy as a nose tackle long-term. This is a guy with upside that you got into late day 3, Brendan, in my opinion. And that's really hard to find, especially in this draft, which had so many floors, so few ceilings. And to get this so late in the draft, to me, makes this a really pretty remarkable pick. The NFL would allow this guy to fall like they did. I think he is an upgrade over what you have in Brandon Peely. I think that he's going to probably make the roster depending on how many defensive linemen, edge, corners, safeties you're going to carry on the team, right? Because this is going to get to be a numbers game at some point or another with certain positional groups. But I thought Eastern really, really had a nice tape and really showed up, and he's just a guy that is a handful to block.
Yeah, I did get that sense from the little bit I've done here. And again, I'll admit that there's a lot more I have to look at here, but the arm length thing really gets me because quite frequently with these low-level nose tackle prospects, the issue is players are going to get into their chest all the time because their arms are so short. Well, that's not the case here. This guy actually has much longer than average arms for a defensive tackle. And
he uses them.
Yeah.
He puts them to work. It's not just long arms. He don't know what to do with them. He knows how to use those hands. He's got some pass rush moves. So that's the other cool part about this, that's that upside I like here is that I don't think he's a finished product. I think he's still developing. And I think that he has those traits that you can't teach.
Right. All right. So you've got a clip here. You want to go ahead and walk us through? I'll take off the banner.
Yeah, so these are meant to be, again, just snapshots of the players to give you a play that kind of really encompasses what you get to see from these players as far as at the foremost and what they bring, more than being a full tape breakdown for you guys. And so what you're going to get to see on this is, to me, a little bit of what I just talked to Brendan about. Initial quickness, and you're going to see him using his hands. This is a play that's supposed to be set up to be a screen. So by all measure, the quarterback should be able to get this ball out of his hands, but he ends up not being able to do so. And I'm going to mark where you're going to see Eastern there. Gets into the backfield and causes, I think they end up calling it technically an incomplete pass, but the quarterback never gets his hand out here. It's well covered up on the play too by number 3 of the defense, which takes that away. But watch the hands. Wow. Hits him with the swim move back there in the backfield in the heartbeat. This is a man. What was the weight? 330, Brennan? What
he was 315 at the combine, so he probably plays around 320.
So it definitely plays around that 320, 325 mark. Being that quick off the ball. And look where he leaves his offensive lineman. Just completely defeats that block. Like, there's some blocks on screenplays where you're letting the defensive lineman through, Brendan. To my eyes on this does not look like he's letting him through. This just looks like he whooped his ass.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Very nice. I like it.
So good quickness off the ball, good length, knows how to use those hands, gets him upside, get it in day 3. You love this kind of pick. And Fuller and him back to back, it's kind of all wow, there's some true upside here. Well, even if Fuller doesn't make as a cornerback, maybe he turns into a league average safety, above average league safety going there. And that's like, to get that value late in day 3 is pretty tremendous.
Mm-hmm. So that one's definitely fun. Do you think that he's a 1-tech or a 3-tech ultimately, by the way?
I think he's a 1-tech, but I do think that Mike is showing a lot of willingness, like we talked about with the secondary, to turn some of this into a ubiquitous nature where it's less and less becoming positional in this defense specifically, where even O'Reilly Mills last year was eating up nose tackle snaps. There's no way your or my evaluation had anywhere near the territory of thinking Mills was going to become or would be taking snaps from a nose tackle position coming out of college. But that's where they had him, and Mike seems to be comfortable doing this. And so to that degree, that tells me that maybe Mike's starting to kind of lean a bit into this of like, what if I just keep it all all the guys do all the stuff inside. Nothing is specified.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we had one more player, but this one did not go to the combine, so I don't really have any measurements or testing numbers for him. It's Michael Dansby of Arizona, another cornerback. So we did stock up on these cornerbacks here. Could not find his age either. I don't have a lot on him. I know he was part of a very good Arizona secondary last year with who else was in there with him? Yeah, Stukes. And I think there was one other really good player in there as well, whose name is escaping me at the moment. But
I'm forgetting as well.
Yeah, Dansby.
There is one though. You're right. There is one.
Yeah. So Dansby, I know that there are rumors that he's like lightning fast, but it's unofficial. Like some people were saying, oh, he's a 4.25 guy, which I don't know about that, but maybe unofficially, right? Maybe somebody using the stopwatch. So I don't really have anything on Dansby other than the fact that there's rumors that he's really, really fast and really athletic. So do you got anything about Dansby?
I mean, I watched some tape on him. He's definitely a small guy at 5'11", 185. So when he's very hyper quick, hyper fast. I don't know if 4.2, I think is what he was trying to say. He was timed at. It's like I don't think we're looking at 4.2 over on the outside. But a guy that with that speed tended to be on the tape I've been able to watch, and I'm very tight in coverage. He is very hard to get away from. His stop and start and recovery speed, and he's got good enough ball skills to get his head around at the right time. I wouldn't say he's got great hands necessarily, but he's got enough ball skills to kind of combine it up with where it gets interesting there. Not the base guy. There's going to be, I think, some missed tackles that you're going to look with him on the books. He's a little bit the antithesis of the other guys where there's some tackling questions versus the other guys in this draft we took. But just, I mean, a pure cover guy, kind of a little bit like the Nehemiah Pritchett thing. He's like a 2-inch shorter version of kind of like Nehemiah Pritchett. They played some man, they played some zone, a little bit of press in there. Probably more of an off zone guy, because you don't want him pressing too much because he's not particularly big. I don't think he's particularly long. So you're going to probably want to keep him more off coverage and let him drop in his zone and drive on routes and then, run with guys, basically pick him up and run. But he's solid. I don't know that. Little bit of this one's a little bit the Henderson one where you wonder after all these corners you've taken and who you have on the roster of, is there the pathway even for this guy to make the practice squad right now? And I'm not as sure on that. But
Yeah, yeah. I think he can make the practice squad, but there's no path to him for the roster unless he just sets the world on fire at camp.
yeah.
So I would say this is probably just kind of a random. Guys like this, sometimes you just want to have them in the building for training camp, so you have them on speed dial. So if somebody gets hurt, you're like, let's go get that guy because I kind of liked him during camp. There is
Well,
something to be said for that.
Well, and what I thought, Brendan, was that I think that's a good point. I think on top of it is that I thought the Seahawks went a little bit more need, like in prior drafts, the way that this has gone is Seattle's gone heavy value early in the drafts in the last 3 or 4 drafts, and then they've gone more need later in the drafts. This year they flipped it around. And so they went to me a little more need early on, and they came back around to value later on. Like, who's just the highest value guys we got on our board? And what we've talked about leading up to this draft, of course, was that maybe the cornerback position has a strong argument to being the strongest positional group in this entire draft. So when you get to being picking in the 7th round, if value's running the day, knowing how drafts play, like, well, then the tendency would probably be that there'd be a corner on that board as your highest, most valued guy at that spot when you're picking then. And that does seem to be a bit of the process that took them here to Dansby, which I can understand and falls in alignment with how they kind of ran the rest of this draft with Fuller and Eastern and then on this day 3.
Right. So not a lot I can say here, and I don't think there's much of a point in saying much here because I think he's so unlikely to ever actually be on this team and play in a meaningful way. But I don't think anything you do this late in the 7th round, and this was literally, I think, the 3rd to last pick of the draft, can be criticized. Yeah. Like take whoever you want to take. Who cares?
Yeah, I agree. It's you want to put the onus on draft, like draft grades. I'd never take draft grades and be like, well, here's my draft grades and what's the collective grade. You want to measure the higher grade, the players taken earlier a little bit higher, where you're finding value maybe later, kind of all together, because these guys don't often do much.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that takes us home here. I know that there were undrafted free agents we signed, but nothing in that group really clicked with me in the sense of, oh, that guy's going to make the team. There's no Jake Bobo this year. There's no Thomas Rawls this year to me. I think a lot of these guys are almost drawing dead on even making the roster because you look at what's ahead of them and it's like, good luck.
Agreed. I Hubbard's fine, but I think Ivy's better. And yeah. I don't know that there isn't really a pathway there for it. So yeah, I didn't see much from, and looking at the tape, these guys to think they're going to overtake what we have here. Part of the issues of having a championship roster, man.
Yeah, remember those Seahawks teams in the early Pete Carroll era had to cut a lot of good players because they were so good they didn't have room for them. Like they cut a running back. I can't remember his name, but he went on to actually be pretty good for the Chiefs. I think it was Spencer Ware. Like he was good, but we just didn't have room for him. So that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah. That was in the midst of getting all those good running backs that you had in house. And I mentioned the 2 4th-round receivers that you had, Chris Harper and Amara Darboh. Had to release those guys and before you had even gotten to the first game of the year. And that's, that's the part where John's got to try to navigate this right in these drafts with understanding, how much do I want to just say, well, first world problems and we're going to be releasing these guys and that's the way it is, versus, well, maybe I should more package these picks together then to get more of a impactful player versus just trying to bring a bunch of guys in that I'm just going to release anyway, kind of, or we'll never see the field. And I don't envy John on this. That's a tough, balance. Cause ideally you just like to make your picks and then let it all kind of play out and have your strongest roster roll rather than having to package picks together and go get a certain player because you are going to be cutting guys.
Yeah. Heavy lays the crown.
That's right. It's very heavy.
All right. One more time before we get out of here. Sports. If you do, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players' projections and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. I've had a great time using Prize Picks so far. It makes this daily fantasy thing so easy and fun, and it even makes watching the games way more exciting. And with the cool social feeds feature, you can share lineups with your friends and even follow partners to tail or fade their picks. Obviously, we're in the NFL offseason right now, but we've got basketball, baseball, hockey, all kinds of other stuff, so don't be afraid to test things out in whatever sport clicks with you. You can even pick multiple sports in the same lineup and sweat everything at once. And don't forget about team picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So, download Prize Picks, America's #1 sports app. And don't forget, code HMA, that is HMA, gives you $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. All right. So that is our look at the 2026 Seattle Seahawks draft class. I'd say that overall we did quite a good job. I am overall pretty happy with what they did. I think they could have done a little bit better, but I usually come away from drafts kind of feeling that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, me and John Schneider are never going to have the exact same big boards or the exact same perspective on things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, John Schneider's kind of on top of the world right now anyway. So, well, what am I going to say, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah, they've definitely earned a ton of goodwill, and in trusting in John, we trust. We're back to those days to a degree, and part of the fun of this is to try to determine these drafts, what's going on, and where these players are at, and figure it all out. And so I think that the team has made themselves better off of this draft, and they put themselves in a good position here to repeat, especially because I still think that there's going to be some more moves coming down the line for this team beyond where they're standing right now to even make this better. But these guys are going to provide some help this year. They're going to provide some reinforcement. And part of what helped drive the bus last year was the depth of this football team, to be able to call in those backups and to not miss a beat when you need to do so. And you're going to be able to do that with a couple of guys, I think, in this class. Along with us, on top of it, I think the nice underrated part of this is there is some upside there. There is some guys long-term that is, Bo Stevens can be better long-term than a Bradford can for you. A Fuller maybe can be a above average starting safety for your long term, if not a decent corner. Eastern can give you some impact on that defensive line you couldn't get from Peely. You put Peely out there for 6-7 snaps a year, Brendan, last year, and those were going to be negative snaps. Those are going to be PFF graded 40 grades on the books. You put a guy like out here, maybe he can more hold the line or bring a little bit more impact for those snaps.
Right. So we'll see where things end up going, but that kind of just wraps it all up for us. And the next big thing that happens, well, tomorrow and the next day, we have rookie minicamp. We'll see if we learn anything from that. That should be fun. But the schedule drop should be in about 2 weeks. And I do believe me and Brandon are going to do a little bit of a show talking about that once we figure out exactly how the schedule lays out. We'll do our own stuff covering it, of course, as well. But that will probably be the next show. And then we may be going into a little hibernation because not a lot will be happening. But we have every intention of being back for the preseason.
Amen, man. Looking forward to it. And the show just keeps rolling, man. Where the short off season is going to go super fast, Brandon. We're going to blink and be already into July.
Oh, yeah. And there's going to be some stuff that happens over the next couple months as well. And look, if the team decides to go trade for Myles Garrett, we'll definitely do a show about that. But
you better believe it.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. So Brandon, thank you for doing this with me today.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you guys all for watching. Thank you for doing this with me throughout this year, Brendan. It's been a lot of fun as always covering this draft with you. I think we're to year 5 or something and doing this as far as our coverage goes together. And it's been another great year being able to do it, man. A lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So thank you everybody for coming out to watch. And guys, we are officially going into the existential dread part of the off season. Not a lot going to be happening for a little while here. The schedule drop is going to be the one kind of compelling date over the next, I'd say, 2 months. But we are the only team that is truly happy with the way the last season ended. We're having a good off season, and 31 other teams, maybe they're finding their own quantum of solace in there somewhere, but they're not happy like us. So don't forget to enjoy that and appreciate it. And don't forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.